Fair enough. Yeah, you obviously are intimately familiar with them. I certainly can have a better concept and ask more, I hope, intelligent questions if I have a little time to look it through it before that.
That's fair.
The beauty of how we do this is that usually there's still an opportunity, like, because it's an overview and there might be some numbers, it's usually that we don't then immediately have those numbers sort of translate to some kind of bylaw that we're making. So we spend a lot of time doing budget and we come back. So we get the overview, then we come back. There's always opportunity. So hopefully now you've got this will come back in some capacity back to us yet one more time where we've had more time to look at it. And it always feels like, well, couldn't I have had the information before so I could read it? But that's also the whole thing is that this is still, I mean, we're going to be streaming it, but I mean, it's still a very open, I hate to use the words loosey-goosey, but, you know, we're going to ask questions, right? That's the whole idea here, is that then the community can see us ask questions, and so don't feel like you had to have something specific. It's more about there is no bad question or a wrong question.
This is my last question, folks, and then we. So it is a public meeting, and I signed up to a service where I get notification of all the meetings, but I didn't get a notification for this meeting. Is that a different type of public meeting?
Yep.
Okay.
Well, it's not a regularly scheduled meeting. So what you
Okay.
get notice for is the regularly scheduled meetings, the meetings that you approved a calendar for.
Right.
That we published in the paper and on our website.
Okay.
Budget meetings are special meetings, and you will not get a notification for those, although they are on Facebook and they are on our website. Okay?
A notification doesn't go out to the public the same way that it does for. Okay.
Regular meetings. Good question.
Also,
I-
on the budget piece,
Yeah.
my goal would be to present
We
all
are
the numbers to you by our February 3rd meeting.
We're
We-
live, just so you know.
Yeah, just so you know.
Oh, fine.
We have until May 15th to pass our budget, so there's plenty of time in there to let things sit, and it's not like you're gonna have your budget and then have to make some decisions. So we'll try and present all that to you, and we won't leave it till the last day, May 15th, to decide, like, you know, we have some time.
And Councillor Payne, there is also a public open house where the budget is
I know,
presented to them.
I've been.
Yeah, I know you know, but the public
Me and
might
three
not
other
know.
people.
Okay.
Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, so I'm going to just call the meeting to order and start with the Aboriginal Acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Silix, and the Sinix people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. And while we reflect on the Aboriginal Acknowledgement and the concept of environment as our strength, I'd like to also at this time take a moment to reflect on the two Nelson Police Department officers that were involved in the avalanche on Monday. So Wade Tittlemore unfortunately passed as a result of his accidents while out enjoying a day in the backcountry with his colleague Matt. And I know that all of our minds turn to his family at this time, and that we, you know, offer our condolences and whatever we can as a city and as a community to help his family through at this time. We also want to give our thoughts and our prayers and send strength to Matt Nole, who is still in the hospital. He sustained some major injuries, and he's going to have a long road to recovery. And again, we're offering support to his family and his friends as we move forward at this time. So I think we'll just have just a moment to reflect on these two members of our police service and our community. Thank you. As I did at the police board meeting on Wednesday night, I do open the floor to any counselor who would like to say anything at this time. Don't feel that you have to say anything, but this would be an appropriate time if you have any words that you'd like to say. Counselor Woodward.
Yeah, I think, when these kinds of tragic situations happen, it's amazing to watch our community kind of pull together, and this is another example of that. And give support, and help comes from all kinds of different places, and it's just, I feel a lot of strength in that,
Administration, and after fire we'll have probably a short break and then we'll go into administration. So take it away, CFO Jury, and I see that we have Heather from fire, we have the fire chief in the back, and we have John from emergency services all here today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council, for your time today. Just wanted to give briefly, before I turn it over to the team here, give you a brief recap of kind of where we're at and what we've got planned for the next few weeks. So today we're obviously having the presentation from Fire and Emergency Services, followed by Admin and HR. On the 16th, we'll be getting an update on the wastewater master plan. At that next regular meeting, we'll be doing our first 3 readings of the water and wastewater utility rates that we talked about last year. That's kind of the first piece of the billings that they go out, so we need to kind of get that sent out end of the month, so that folks have enough time to get their payments in and things by the deadline. We'll then get our last couple of presentations for the departments. We'll have Public Works and Equipment on the 20th, and there'll be some familiar faces there that you've seen when we had the folks come for water and wastewater, but they'll be talking this time about your sort of general public works, your parks and your snow removal and roads, those types of things, as well as our equipment fleet. And then we'll have further meeting on the 24th on facilities, and then we've kind of got everything, an overview of all the major departments there. So we'll kind of pull it all together and start to present on the 27th what our overall capital plan looks like, and then on the 3rd what our operating budget looks like. And then, as I was mentioning at the top of the meeting, is we'll have some time here to kind of come back and talk about some things, because there'll be some choices and decisions and things we'll have to make on what's priority, and we'll have some recommendations, but of course you'll all have some thoughts, so we'll go through all that before we kind of come up with a plan and have to make a decision on some tax rates for 2023. So that's kind of an overview of sort of the plan going forward. I'll turn it over now to the team here to kind of talk about fire and emergency services.
Thank you.
All right, thanks for having me. We prepared 2 slide presents. So, sorry, I'm Jeff Hebert. I am the fire chief and the director of emergency management. So today you will be actually getting 2 presentations for me, so you'll be sick of hearing my voice shortly. So a fire department presentation, and then afterwards will be a presentation for emergency management.
Which one are you starting
I'm
with?
going to start with fire.
Okay.
So we want to put this on presentation view, right?
Okay, I'm gonna let you do it.
Oh, sorry, Sarah. I can see it. I think it's a little fella right here. Right? Efficiency. Not really. I was told about that little button a long time ago. Okay. So, fire department. Oh,
Well, that's,
I lost something.
yeah, no, that's me. Hang on, I'll just let you do it, and I'll get it. That work?
Oh, I see. Alright. So, fire department, this is the five-year financial plan. First slide. So this is our organizational structure, including kind of our visions for how we're going to proceed in 2023. Myself as the Director of Emergency Management. Currently we have a Secretary Dispatcher.
Sorry.
Yes.
Can we get that sent around? I can't read any of, like, I know where everyone is, but I need to follow along on my screen,
Okay. I will get,
just for that.
keep going and I'll get, Maddie to.
We can truck along until then.
Do you want to move closer, Keith?
Oh, you've got a
Anybody
physical one?
else need a
Oh,
copy
we
of
have a
it?
physical one here.
Oh, yeah, if we
Yeah,
could have
great.
it, so
Yeah,
we could
physical
read
would
it.
be great. Yeah, that's
I'm
fine.
fine, but a copy would help.
We'll send you, we'll email it to you.
Yeah.
Do you have a paper copy?
A paper copy.
Oh, really? Is it okay?
Yep, but they're gonna email.
They're gonna email it shortly, so.
Okay.
And then we're gonna hand them back
I'll talk really slow.
with big words.
We just hyphenate them if we want them bigger. Okay, so we have a secretary, dispatcher, we have a emergency management coordinator and a fire smart coordinator. You'll notice that there is another allocation there for a new executive assistant position, which we're touching on briefly in fire and then in more detail when we get to the emergency management portion of the presentation, because that position will be split between fire and emergency management. Then there's the assistant chief training officer. So that's Rick Maida. He's in charge of obviously the fire prevention program and training, as well as he oversees the 21 auxiliaries. A shift captain, Greg Proctor. His firefighter is Adam Banalevic. B shift captain, Scott Jeffrey. His firefighter is Chaz Meisner. C shift captain is Mark Thibault. He is also a training officer, and his firefighter is Lucas Fortier. D shift captain is Martin Willett, and his firefighter is Jerry Schmidtke.
Chief?
Yes, sir.
Or actually, Mayor? Through the chair? Just was wondering about the 21 auxiliary firefighters.
Yes.
You know, what kind of role do they play? And, you know, are they, there's a house fire, are they being called?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what kind of, what are they, what's their sort of parameters?
So, depending on their level of training, and so they will either be limited to exterior operations, interior operations, or they'll be a full 1001 certified. And so it takes a significant amount of time to bring a firefighter, a new trainee up through the ranks. So that's as laid out by the BC Minimum Training Standards Act. That's the model that the fire departments follow. And so once you become a 1001, then you're pretty much useful in everything that your fire department is certified for, as long as you're trained in those evolutions. So each firefighter is capable of doing different things throughout their career at the fire department. Primarily, we use auxiliary firefighters for full department callouts. That would be structure fires, wildland interface fires, and hazardous material releases, where the career staff and the day staff is just needs too many bodies to make those things safe. So
Thank
yeah,
you.
They get pulled out after hours, get called out in the middle of the night like everybody else.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Mr. Payne?
I'm just trying to understand your reporting structure from your org chart here. So do all of the shift captains report into you directly, or do they report into the assistant chief?
They usually report to me.
Okay, so you've got 9 direct reports then. Is that-
On day-to-day operations, the assistant chief does act as a middleman, but I mean, because we're such a small department,
Yep.
my office is
Yep.
literally right beside the captain's office.
Yeah, you organize, I just wanted to understand, that's the way the lines look to me, I just want to make sure I was understanding the way you'd presented it, thank you.
All right, moving on. So bylaws and policies and guiding documents that kind of guide our work is, our provincial legislation is the BC Structural Firefighters Minimum Training Standards Act, which was, the new version of that was just released in 2022. The BC Fire Services Act, and the OHS Regulation Part 31 of firefighting. Regional is the RDCK Fire Protection and Assistance Response Agreement that we have for our contracted Area E. So we protect Nelson proper, and then we have a contracted area through the regional district that it's probably going to be shown in another slide, but I'll talk a little bit about it. It includes Blewett, the area south of Nelson, to approximately the Give Up Creek brake check area, Savota Road, and Mountain Station, as well as Building Point. So all the kind of landlocked communities that are kind of separated from the other regional fire departments. And then as far as municipal, we have our fire regulation and prevention bylaw as approved by City Council, and our City Council policy on maintaining the fire service level and minimum training standards policy, which is influenced by the BC Structural Firefighter Minimum Training Standards Act, as well as our CWRP. The CWRP is a community wildfire resiliency plan, and it's being revised currently. It was formerly known as the Community Wildfire Protection Plan, for anybody that's interested in that. So some of the emergency services that we provide are obviously we're one of 2 municipalities I'm aware of that still does their own dispatching services, as well as responding to 911 emergency calls. So I guess that's a little misleading. We do our own dispatching services. Everybody responds to 911 emergency calls. So yeah, we're the only one that does that. We obviously communicate with emergency responders and other organizations. Fire and explosions involving structural fires, vehicle fires, wildland, urban interface, and other fires, and any resulting explosions. Medical first responder, which has really increased in time and variety of calls we're responding to these days. Motor vehicle accidents and collisions, largely sponsored by the Emergency Management BC. Hazardous material releases, including anything from a liquid, gaseous, or solid nature, and that can be anywhere from somebody's vehicle is leaking gas to train derailment. High and low slope rescue. A majority of that program is sponsored through TARP, which is the Technical High Angle Rope Rescue Program, which is sponsored by industry. And surface water rescue and confined space rescue. Those are, there's probably some in there that haven't made it, but in a nutshell, those are the emergency services that we provide. You'll see in the photos there, there's a firefighter in a bathroom wrapped up in Tyvek. That's actually a hazardous material release due to illicit drug behavior in a public bathroom. So. Non-emergency services, and this is just, I mean, the slides can only be so long. Fire inspections of commercial properties. Municipalities are mandated under the Fire Services Act to conduct commercial fire inspections. BC Fire Code enforcement and orders, fire investigations, public education and smoke detector programs, community inquiries, working alone monitoring for the regional district in the city of Nelson. Those are contracted services. We have Fire Smart programs, school programs, senior programs, wildfire, just a variety of certain programs and committees that we're sitting on. As far as well as development and building plan reviews and site visits to make sure. I mean, City of Nelson's got a real good approach to that sort of thing. It gets passed by all the departments for feedback, and so quite often we spend a lot of time working with the other departments on making sure that everything's up and safe. After our hydro calls and public works call answering, so if you phone the city 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you'll get an answer from somebody, and after hours, after 3 o'clock, it's going to be the fire department. And then fire by law enforcement. So as I referenced before, our fire response area, it's the area in the kind of the darker hue of orange. It's not differentiating between the municipality of the city of Nelson and the regional district area E. That's an overall area of the section that we protect, as well as if you notice to the north, there's a small section across the Orange Bridge that we protect as well.
Question, Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. So, you know, the police have that calculation of size of town and the size of the police department,
Yes.
and it's quite strict, it seems. Is there a same calculation for fire department and size of town?
There is not.
Because I'm looking through this as you're talking, and it's a huge amount of work, and I was just wondering, where are we at in terms of like, workload and size of the department? It's maybe even go into that later, I would imagine, but.
We can touch on it now. City of Nelson has had a fire service since 1891, and since about the 50s, the department is basically largely run the same way. Same amount of manpower from the 50s to now. Things are getting busier. I mean, we're at capacity. I mean, but we're problem solvers, and we get the work done, and sometimes things have to get put off to the next day because of emergencies. That's just the nature of our business. I mean, a lot of stuff gets put off to the next day because, I mean, just the number of calls that we respond to. I mean, when I first started, 22 years ago, I think we were running between 600 and 700 calls a year, and now we're almost 1,300. So, I mean, there's not enough hours in the day. If anybody knows how to manufacture more, let me know.
Okay. Okay, that's good to know, thank you.
You can make minutes, 59 seconds. Through the mayor,
Yes.
I would just add to that, well, police will have a very strong linkage to humans because of the number, that's the nature of their business. Fire departments aren't, but there's a much stronger link between the fire department and the insurance that people are able to maintain, which comes down to response times, that ability to be at a certain location and be able to move a certain amount of water with a certain amount of manpower is what's really going to kick in. You see that playing itself out in some of the advocation at the RBCK side, because of course some of those further rural areas struggle to have suitable fire insurance because there's just simply not a fire department that can get over to Glade in a certain amount of time, and therefore they get that impact. They really see it on their fire insurance side. It's because it's really a lot of the times about protecting both life but property.
Yeah. So further to that, then Fire Underwriters is basically the organization that sets the insurance rate for the city of Nelson. And so they do an assessment of the city and absolutely everything. And I think they're actually probably coming this year to redo it. And that sets the insurance rating for the city. So we've done things in the past as insurance companies are looking into things more. We've actually picked up, you'll see in the slide there at the bottom, it's actually a training evolution that we've been certified for to reduce insurance rates for the areas of the city that aren't supplied by hydrants and areas of the regional district that we protect that aren't serviced by hydrants. And it's called a Superior Tanker Shuttle Service. And it's something, it's an accreditation through Fire Underwriters that we do maintain every year. And so we've been doing that since 2014, and it's dramatically reduced the insurance rates for those areas. So we're working towards it. I'm not sure the calculations on, the insurance rates. They basically look at your city and say, this is what your insurance rates are. I'm not sure how the math works for, if we added this or if we did this, or how does that change the insurance rates, the holders of the map.
Okay, supplemental? So I guess my sort of in my head, I'm like thinking about, you know, risk calculation as a city grows quite quickly in the last 2-3 years. And, you know, our, you know, the different arms of our emergency services are, you know, critical as that growth happens. And just, you know, not letting the fire department get stretched so thin that, you know, you aren't able to deliver what is needed. So I guess I'm just curious about how this plays out over the next, say, 5 to 10 years as the city grows. And, you know, will that calculation be done, or how, you know, will we know?
So, to my knowledge, it has not been done yet, but I do have intentions of doing it in my tenure. But in the short period I've been the fire chief, I haven't been able to do that yet. So it's on the strategic plan to look at our fire service and ways to make it better. And, you know, if we can find some efficiencies, great. But I mean, if we need to make a change in how we operate and upstaff it, then I mean, that's the council decision at that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Also, Pinero has a question.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, just one more. You said that there wasn't a standard for population size to department size across the province, but are you aware of sort of a norm? And how does Nelson stack up in, as far as their staffing goes to their population, and are we sort of understaffed in relation to other municipalities, or are we doing about what we should be doing, or?
Yeah, so, I mean, the only ones that we can draw kind of some similar comparisons to would be other municipalities of similar size. We often look at, you know, Trail, Cranbrook, Castlegar. We're the largest city technically in that group. Well, sorry, Cranbrook's larger, but Trail bigger. I think they have 15 career firefighters, maybe more. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head what their current staffing is. We have 11. I think Cranbrook's in the 20-something firefighters for Cranbrook. Fernie, they're currently, they just received, Fernie is upstaffing. They just hired 3 new positions, I believe. So we're a little on the low side. But I mean, like I said before, we're palm sellers, so we make do with what we have. I think a proper assessment and needs assessment needs to be done. That's one of my goals for going forward.
Thank you.
Any questions? All right, because our declared level of service is an all hazards declarements. So through the Office of the Fire Commissioner requires every municipality to make a declaration of the level of service. City of Nelson has declared all hazards, which is the highest level. It's appropriate for a career fire department. So with that, we do high and low angle. So these are all our training requirements. We do the high angle and low slope rescue. We do incident scene management. That's a level 1 and level 2. Fire service instructor is a 1 and a 2. In order to be an officer, you need to have fire service instructor 1. To be a training officer, you need to have. It's recommended to have 2. There's general fireground suppression tactics, first responder instruction and recertification. We do our hazardous material training, which all firefighters in British Columbia need to be trained to an operations level. We used to maintain 2 technicians. One technician retired, and I was the other technician. This all happened through COVID, so there was no ability to retrain our hazmat technicians. So we'll get into it a little bit later, but we've applied for grant funding to bridge those training gaps at no cost to the city. Confined space, again, our confined space technician retired during COVID. it would happen to be the same person. And that's something you'll notice with being that we're a small department. We have a lot of people who are cross-trained, and so due to retirements and movement, when you lose one person, you lose a lot of training. So we need to bring that back up. That is another course that we have applied for grant funding for, and we're hoping for approval. We do vehicle extrication, obviously, wildfire and emergency management planning. That is the we'll get it more into the emergency management planning later, but that's a very large portion of what we do these days for good reason. Fire Smart Home Partners Program. Fire Smart is a provincial priority, and for good reason. We're kind of in a hot spot with surrounded by trees, so it's good. Wildland and structural protection. We've been doing a lot of good work on this since 2008. The STSS, the Superior Tanker Shuttle Service, it's a tongue twister, apparently. So I was referring to that a little bit earlier, and that was actually a significant reduction. Anecdotal information, retired Fire Chief Simon Gritma lives out in Blewett, and he said that his residential insurance rates dropped by $1,000 a year when we got that certification. So it's significant. It's a very difficult certification to meet and maintain, and with us and our partners in the regional district, we were able to do it. So auxiliary training and intake weekend. So municipalities, even regional districts, volunteer fire departments, it's not like when I started. I mean, when I started, there was a core group of volunteers that they were there 20, 30 years. Lives were a lot slower, the training requirements were a lot less, and people stayed longer. And now people are interested in helping their community, but when they start getting into the organization and realizing what the training requirements are, and it's very difficult to maintain auxiliary firefighters, to the point where I think we have, out of our 21 auxiliaries, we probably have 15 brand new ones.
All right.
Through the chair, are they paid?
They are paid for practice and fire call-outs, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, we call them auxiliary, not volunteer.
Right.
There is some portion of their work that is volunteer. We all do, similar things, but they do receive compensation. Yeah, I'm not sure if there are any truly volunteer. Maybe there are probably some, but far less. I mean, it's just very difficult to maintain auxiliary departments. And then same thing, like if you lose, and everybody's in a various stage in their training, because you're moving from the exterior to the interior to the 1001 steps, and we do that so we can get them operational faster. If you just wait to train everybody to the 1001, then you have people that can't do anything until they get their 1001. At least if you train to exterior, then they can do exterior. Once you get to the interior, then they can do interior, and then when they get to the 1001, they can do the full service. So it's a tiered approach, but what happens when you have a full complement of auxiliaries like we do now, and then in a year you've lost 3, so now you're running 2 classes. And then another year you've lost 3 more, now you're running 3 classes. And so we got to a point where we actually held off training one group because we noticed that we had lost some due to people moving away, getting jobs, people, their lives are just getting busier. And so we actually held off on starting their training and just did a whole bunch of familiarization. Like, they were still getting trained, but we weren't training to the goal of exterior, so that we could get the large group going and train them all up at once, because it's just, I mean, we don't have an infinite supply of trainers, so it's very onerous.
They get elected to city council.
Guess what, 10,
They get elected
1001.
to city council.
Or they get elected to city council and quit.
Another question, I just
Sorry.
I could feel it.
10:01, I get exterior,
Sorry.
I get interior. I'm trying to piece it
10:01,
together in my head, but it's
And
not coming.
so I do have a whole bunch of little speaking notes off to the side here that I haven't looked at all, which I'm very happy about. 1001 is an NFPA standard. So NFPA is an organization out of the United States that develops a list of best practices for, and if you were to Google NFPA standards, you're going to get an absolutely enormous list of probably no less than hundreds of documents, standards on absolutely everything pertaining from development, building, firefighter operations. A lot of it's the National Fire Protection Agency. And 1001 is the standard for firefighter professional requirements. So once, you need a 1001 to become a career firefighter. Sorry.
And is that sorry,
Yeah.
see that. Is that an entry way for people to become a career firefighter? Is through
In
the
Nelson, it certainly
auxiliary?
is.
It is,
So
okay.
you can either go away to a third-party educational institute like College of the Rockies,
Got it.
maybe somewhere, the Justice Institute, and get it. But we can also offer the same certification. It just takes a lot longer through us because, I mean, they only train 2.5 hours a day, 3 times a month.
Okay, got it. Thank you, interesting.
So yeah, I got a whole list of NFPA documents here that would just bore you with numbers, but yeah, NFPA is a giant organization. It's not law, it's best practices, and then, but once it's adopted in a bylaw, then it does become law. So this is a lovely pie chart that is of all, basically is just statistics of the 2022 calls to date. It's pretty much, the percentages, plus or minus 2 or 3%, pretty much stay the same for like the fire responses and the first responders. The makeup of those calls is a lot different. For instance, I mean, if you take a look at the sidebar, call volume statistics, overdose calls. So in 2022, we responded to 109 overdose calls. When I first started 22 years ago, it'd be 1 or 2 a year. I mean, somebody would have an overdose call and you would be talking about it around the coffee room. It's like, oh, wow, what happened? And now it's, we had as many as 6 in one day. So it's definitely that combined with there were longer BC ambulance wait times due to staff shortages and things like that, COVID. And so our time on scene was a lot longer. And I mean, obviously we're responding to a different variety of calls. Total Fire Smart assessments, 94 Fire Smart assessments for the city of Nelson in 2022. That's absolutely phenomenal. And like I was saying, our total call volume was 1,245 for 2022. I see it.
The fire safety inspections, those are the commercial
correct.
inspections that you were talking about before? So there's a cycle for those that you get inspected on a monthly basis? or-
No, it'll be, depending on the occupancy, some of them will be a 6-month inspection, some will be an annual inspection, some will be like a 2-year inspection.
And are those multi-resident?
Yeah, so
Things as well?
like apartment buildings and stuff like that, yes, they're included
Okay,
in that.
thank you.
Nope.
Yeah, further to that, so total fire safety inspection 657,
Yes.
so like 3 per working day?
I'm gonna tell you that annually, we probably have about 1,000
Uh-huh,
that we need to do.
uh-huh.
And because of things that, emergency calls, as soon as we get an emergency call, we stop doing what we're doing and respond to the emergency call. So we're always behind on our inspections. We get about 3/4 of them done every calendar year.
And that's the people on shift?
That's the people on shift, yeah. It's really good. I mean, it gets all our members out into the commercial buildings. They serve us well. Not only are they mandated by the provincial government that we need to do them because we're a municipality, but it's really good building familiarization for all our firefighters. So it's important work. All right, community programs and committees. So, obviously we have a school program. One of our captains looks at that program, and so he goes out every year doing Fire Prevention Week and visits all the schools. We got Fire Smart Home Assessments. If you'll notice that beside each one that has a little booklet page or whatever you want to call it, it indicates that it's a grant-funded activity. So the Fire Smart Home Assessments, grant-funded activity. Seniors Fire Smart Program, also grant-funded. Wildfire mitigation and community volunteer events, again, all grant-funded. Nelson and Area Wildfire Risk Reduction Committee, it's grant-funded. It is an extremely important committee that is a requirement of actually applying for a lot of grants now. Smoke Detector Assistance Program, and we sit on the Fentanyl Task Force Committee. Moving on to the next slide.
Okay, I just,
Questions?
it's like a public service announcement, but I don't know if you do this every year. I know you said you had some challenges with COVID, but when we moved into our home 5 years ago, the firemen actually came around and installed our smoke detectors. And when you live in a heritage house with 10-foot ceilings, it is not easy to install your smoke detectors, because this year, you know, we checked the batteries, and this year we had to replace the batteries, and that in itself was a feat of acrobatics for me to do. So my gratitude lives on long around that, and I'm just wondering, that's an annual event that you have done in the past in
So
September timeframe, or?
It's a live program. Anybody that phones up the fire department and has an issue with their smoke detector, we will not let that issue go. You will go to sleep that night with a working smoke detector. If we need to provide you with one, we will provide you with one. If we need to change the batteries in yours, that's what we'll do. If we need to get a crew in there with a 16-foot ladder because somebody was really nice and put it in their lofted ceiling, you will not go to bed that night without a working smoke detector.
Well, we went immediately to Home Hardware and got a battery and replaced it, but it was quite a job, let me tell you. You guys made it look easy when you came in to do it the first time.
And like I say, if you have, anybody ever has any issues with their smoke detectors, give us a call. Smoke detectors save lives.
They do.
We've never had a fatality in a house that didn't have a working smoke alarm. All right, this is a big one. This is something that never existed, especially in capacity, until, I mean, this goes back to 2018. We were applying for grants a little bit before that, but grants is a huge part and allows us to do a lot of that extra work that we were talking about prior with those little cards beside the words. So in the past 5 years, Nelson has applied and secured 16 grants, accounting for over $1.4 million. The grant funding enables us to provide many impactful wildfire mitigations and increase the resilience in the community and programs. So, I mean, I'm not going to read every single one, but those are, we got from 2018 to 2022, we have a lot of wildfire mitigation work that we were doing back to 2008. That some of that was grant funded as well, but this is just a kind of like a snapshot of the last 5 years. And then 2023, what we have scheduled for 2023, and as you can see, the dollar values are just starting to tick up and up and up, and that's all. Obviously, 2023 is pending approval from the grantors. We have to wait for CBT approval, UBCM approval, and the REDIP approval. And that's a new grant, and I'm not going to tell you what REDIP stands for because I can't remember. Heather?
Next week.
Program.
Heather knows.
I believe it is the Rural Economic Development Initiative Program.
Everyone go for
Everyone
that?
wants to-
Yeah,
work for now.
that works for
If everybody wants to Google check us, that'd be
No, no.
It is a new one, and so we have worked with CBT and UBCM quite closely in the past, and but that's a new one that we're looking at this year, and there's more and more popping up. I mean, sometimes there's probably grants out there you're not even aware of. Yeah. Okay, so 2022 revenue. Fire services are very rarely revenue-generating entities, and we've tried our
T-shirts, coffee mugs.
yeah. Sorry, I mean, it is what it is. We we try to do our best. So anyways, we do a working alone. It's an important gap that's required. There's obviously the RDCK fire protection agreement, certain fees for service, answering services. Big one's grant funding. I mean, it's just, I don't have a spare $286,000 in my budget, but I mean, if we can apply for grants to secure that, or more, and as more grants become available, I mean, that allows us to do an amazing amount of work.
Whoa,
What, oh,
all the hands
Who's
went up.
first?
Let's go
I don't know,
over here. We haven't
that
heard
was-
from Councillor Tate for a bit.
Hi, could you tell me the difference between grant funding to 86.3 and the grant funding 610 on the previous slide? Please? Oh, those are the different years. Oh, that's the potential in that. Oh, I get the 286. Thank you.
Problem.
I gotcha. I'm with ya.
Okay, back over to the Councillor Payne.
my question is just around the RDCK fire protection agreement. Does that do you match it up? Is it a fee per service? Is that fee calculated every year, and you hope you don't spend more than that?
It's a good question. We're not 100% sure on the prior calculations. We're doing that right now because our fire service agreement is actually up for renewal right now, so we're doing a reassessment on how that number is calculated. It was readjusted in 2018, and then it was increased a certain percentage every year since then until this point here. How they came up with the math in 2018, the math has been calculated differently during every contract. I've found consultant reports that recommended there was mathematical calculations. One period in 2011 there was a mathematical calculation, and each one just didn't seem to fit. So we're doing another assessment just because we want to make sure that we're getting fairly compensated for the service that we're providing, and it is it's a full service. I mean, so the contracted residents of Area E are getting the service of a full-time municipal full-service fire department. So we just need to make sure that it's properly costed out.
Yeah, so Chief, I would say it is a fee-for-service agreement that's negotiated with the RD on a fairly regular basis. I think it would be safe to call it a fee-for-service. It's, I mean, how we land on the numbers is, and I can see Chris Jurius sliding, trying to
he is
slide into
just
the
like-
picture here, but having sat at the table a few times, I know it is an agreement that's reached with the RDCK in terms of, and it is a benefit to those people in the area in terms of having a full-service department do their fire protection. So, yeah.
I think the chief mentioned already, but it's a 5-year agreement that ended in 2022. So we have, we're kind of extending it for 6 months so we can figure out a new agreement for 2023. So this is the exercise we're going through now. It's, what is the cost of providing this? What should we do to kind of get that forward and, for 5 years?
Yeah, and at a minimum, we need to try to build in some kind of inflationary cost because we're paying unionized wage to our professional firefighters, and we can't leave what we're charging the RDCK behind without having those adjustments in there going forward for the next 5 years.
If I may add, and the benefit that you mentioned of dramatically reducing the insurance costs to the residents of the area that you serve, that has to be a huge factor as well for the RDCK patients.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm wondering if the RDCK fire protection agreement needs to factor in the increased wildfire risks that are happening now, because, I mean, what starts out there can
Yeah, so
impact the city.
we have what's called it's called the Fire Smart Committee. It's a Nelson Area Wildfire Risk Reduction Committee, and that is comprised of the Regional District Fire Smart, the Regional District Wildfire Mitigation Specialist, the BC Parks, Nelson Emergency Management, Nelson Fire Smart, myself, Heather, and we work together applying for grants to fuel mitigate all this area. So all the area that's outside the city of Nelson, which actually belongs to the regional district, we're working with them to fuel mitigate that work. So I think I'm answering your question. Like, they are taking responsibility and applying their grant funding to help protect the city of Nelson. Now, as far as the fire service, I mean, I think how it's been done in the past is that we make an assessment of what it costs to run our service, and then so a fair share of that price, and it's usually it's a dollar value per thousand of assessed value.
I guess just supplemental. I just, as science is showing us, the risks are going up, wildfire and drying out in the summer, and, hopefully we're tracking with that risk and applying costs where needed, or, that the funding is there. If these risks are going up and we have to spend more time as a city to protect our boundaries and what lies right beyond it, then we really need to factor that into these costs. Like I almost feel like there would be an inflationary piece to this agreement. Each year, I would imagine, according to climate science, that these risks are increasing.
Yeah, and we certainly, the regional district does take care of the fire smart and mitigation work in that contracted area E. So I mean, there isn't a direct correlation with this is what we spend in the city of Nelson. It doesn't necessarily directly go to correspond to that. The suite of services that we provide area E is like fire protection services, medical first responder, and the suite of like the hazmat and rope rescue and the confined space and all that sort of stuff. When it gets down into the fire smart and the wildfire mitigation and all that sort of stuff, that the RD still takes that.
Thank you.
But certainly we're looking at all those options so that we can get an accurate idea of what the proper compensation is for the service to that area. And so Chris and I are working together.
Thank you, Chief.
All right. Sorry, let me just read the slide, make sure I got everything here. All right, moving on. All right. So this is a snapshot of significant work completed between 2018 and 2022. This is largely geared around wildfire work. Fire departments, we train to protect houses, and so that's what we do. It's not really anything that's different from year to year. But when it comes to our wildfire work, it's significant and noteworthy. So we got public outreach. So our Fire Smart program, which is grant funded, it pays for a Fire Smart coordinator. She works out of the fire hall, and public outreach and education is part of it. She's attended 40 market events, and I believe
40 market events between 2018 and 2022.
okay.
Yeah.
With an average of 50 community connections per market. So we're looking at about 2,000 face-to-face interactions over that time frame. We've also completed 2 wildfires risk reduction open houses. So that committee that I was referring to earlier as the Fire Smart Committee or the Nelson Area Wildfire Risk Reduction. We as a group hold that every couple of years. COVID, I think we did one in 2019. COVID interrupted them a fair bit. We weren't allowed to do it. We had one last year and we're doing one again this year. And timing for that event is instrumental because you can't hold it during wildfire season because then you won't have any experts show up because they're all working. And then after the wildfire season over, nobody cares about wildfire anymore. So, so this year we're doing it, I think, in June, just prior to wildfire season, where we still have access to the experts and the wildfire risk is ramping up. So we're trying that out this year. So on the right there is a little snapshot of the total hectares that we treated between 2019 and 2022. It's 134 hectares. Some of it is with the regional district, some of it is with parks, and some of it is within the city of Nelson. Do you have anything to speak to that, Heather?
Yeah, just that the city of Dawson's total is 35.9. That's mitigation work that we funded and organized, and then outside the city limits, the other number there.
98.2 hectares.
Yeah, that's through BC Parks and the RDCK. And I guess one other thing to speak to there is that we're quite limited. We can't just go into the RDCK, get some funding and start doing mitigation work. So we're limited to within the city limits and 1 kilometer of our WUI. So grant funding won't even consider anything farther than that. That's a change because the pictures you see there, that's right outside of the 5-mile water intake. And we collaborated with BC Parks to get a large chunk of that done, completed last year, or sorry, 2021. And so we aligned with them for grant funding, $90,000. We did 7.8 hectares up there, and they were doing another 10 or 15 adjacent to the same treatment unit that we were doing. So there's a nice protection project that they're doing up there with multiple different teams. So they've changed that now with UBCM wanting us to focus within municipal boundaries and really stick to our borders, which is a challenge, and one of the reasons that it's so great that we're on that fire smart committee, because we're able to collaborate, if not allow us. Like, we were not able to give grant funding to them anymore for outside work, but we're able to collaborate ideas of how to best protect Nelson and which areas we should
So, does their criteria not envision a scenario where we might have an existing partnership agreement with the RDCK for shared responsibility over those areas? Or, that's my first question, like, we go as far as a partnership agreement and say we're going to do this together, and
Right.
treat it as our own natural block, because of course it has its natural features when it comes to wildfire protection.
The grant outline right now speaks to nothing of that. Like I said, it's a change in 2023 that they all of a sudden went to municipal boundaries or regional boundaries or the 1 kilometer of your WUI. WUI is wild.
Urban
I didn't see
intervention.
your peg. So yeah,
I work it out
don't
for a
know
while
about
now.
that. It's definitely something we could look into because that would be a great way to broaden our ability to be outside of our boundaries.
Yeah, okay. Maybe get, if I may, at some point, maybe send me some more of the details and I can see what advocacy I can do on the UBCM board and bring that issue up. I'd like to understand it with more specificity at a later time.
I think what's key there is to continue the conversations with the RD so that at least, if we're not allowed to step into their land, at least that they're not mitigating over there and we're mitigating over here, where we could both be right like that, stacked on top of each other,
Yeah,
doing
and that's that committee.
mitigation, and that's where that committee,
Is
I think,
instrumental,
really
yeah.
plays an important role. We knew that there was some changes when I was on that, like, we could feel there's some changes that were gonna come, didn't know they were gonna be this drastic now that I'm not at the RD table anymore. But yeah, that the always shifting sands makes it difficult with grants and doesn't really encourage that much collaboration. But I think because we've had such great success with the collaboration with the regional district, particularly around fire, that we need to just continue to strengthen that and make sure that at least we're working in the same areas. And, you know, we're below the tracks and you're above the tracks, but we're gonna do that particular area together, not on either side of the city. So good work, continue that good work, and I'm sure that Councillor Page will continue to push that when he sees that there's a misalignment between what we're trying to achieve.
Thanks for that. Okay, so that's significant work. I'm just gonna.
Sorry, I just wanted to mention, if people are listening, that this work is primarily to have the survivability of the infrastructure, right?
Yeah, so this one in particular, that you see the pictures of, was geared around protecting the 5-mile water intake, which is critical infrastructure.
Yes.
And so, yeah, our wildfire efforts, and that's part of stuff that we'll get into when we start getting into the emergency management side of it. The responsibility of the owners of critical infrastructure to have emergency management plans is being laid out in the new revamp of the Emergency Program Act.
Right. Yes, because the boundaries of our town, of course, are porous in terms of infrastructure and natural assets. So I think, as we move forward, like, this kind of work is so critical. And that relationship between Nelson and the RD is only going to get more critical as we move forward.
It is, and I mean, I don't have the exact number, but even in collaboration with, what we need to do is be able to find a way to work with, on private lands, because the city of Nelson is it's basically bordered by BC Parks, large parcels of private land, and some regional district. So the private lands is the tough egg to crack. So we're working on some creative solutions, but there's still concepts at this point to jump over those hurdles.
Thank you.
Grant funded, I mean, there's lots of grant funded stuff that we've done. That's my next slide there. Well, let's not get into that. All right, there's a lot going on this slide here, but basically what this is showcasing the Fire Smart program and the 2 grant funded activities that accompanied it. One was the seniors program, and one was the Fire Smart rebate program. So the Fire Smart rebate program allowed residents of the city of Nelson to have a Fire Smart assessment, and then taking those assessment recommendations into consideration, contract out or do Fire Smart work on their properties and apply for a rebate of up to $500 to help encourage residents to do Fire Smart work on their properties. And so we had 20 residents participate in that program, and total rebates were $7,478.
I'll just speak to that. There was a lot more people who had the first initial Fire Smart assessment and then have not yet done the work. It's lots of people. And those rebates will continue into 2023, so people can continue to do the work. We'll definitely roll that out. So people know. People can continue to do the work and get rebated.
Yeah, so that rebate program, my understanding, is going to go from $500 this year to $1,000 next year. So it's a program that is being continued, which is excellent. To date, we've had 20 people complete their projects, with a lot of outstanding projects that aren't shown here on this slide. The other one was the seniors program, and it was also geared towards vulnerable populations, single mothers, reduced income, all sorts of things that offered challenges. And so in this one here, with the Fire Smart inspection, we would actually coordinate with a contractor. They would go in, they would do all the work that was recommended, and the grant paid for it. So there was no cost out of their pockets. It was really good quality work. And then you see the total funding that we received on that is $20,000. And that was, I believe, a restart program for economic recovery program. And I don't believe that is being extended through the grantors for another year. It was a 1-year only program. Okay. Other things that we got done through that CRI grant, that was a CBT CRI grant. We commissioned a report from a University of Alberta professor, Mark Ackerman, He is in the Department of Mechanical Engineering and is a professional engineer in fire studies, and so he's done a report for us on building materials that are resistant to ember transmission. So, and then some recommendations. So that report was finalized close to the end of 2022, and so we're reviewing it and then we're going to be creating a working group within the city departments to distill the information and see where we're going to go with it. As we touched earlier, the opioid crisis, this number is off by a couple. It says 107, or it was actually 109. You can see by the graph it's somewhat cyclical. I don't have a reason for that. Possibly music festivals south of Nelson. Not sure. But yeah, so it's a large increase. Some of the challenges obviously is it used to be just a fentanyl. It keeps growing. Now there's benzodiazepine, which is not responsive to naloxone. So they're mixing different cocktails and different drugs. So naloxone is still effective against the fentanyl portion of the cocktail, but not necessarily the benzodiazepine portion of the cocktail. So,
Mayor?
Yes.
So I think this is from my other work that I do, but I think the struggle here is the drugs are becoming more toxic by the year, plus users can be pursuing more severe drugs because they're looking for that, and so then you're struggling as an emergency responders with this escalating situation.
yeah.
So really toxic drugs and people searching out more extreme highs. I guess I just wanted to ask where you think, I mean, is it manageable? Is this moving in a upward trajectory where, because when you went back a bunch of slides, the amount of calls you're taking for this is growing. Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering about those trend lines.
Our fire reporting software wasn't set up to track individual types of first responder calls. Shortly after I became the fire chief, we got some reprogramming done on it, and we can actually run reports strictly on the overdose calls. So we're able to break that down. So we're pulling those statistics now, but that data is missing from the previous years. Yeah, we're playing catch up.
Yeah.
Because it's a new hazard that we're not, or a new type of call that we haven't been dealing with through the whole career. So
Yeah, it seems like an escalating situation.
yeah, it's not going away.
Thank you.
So, in responding to this changing landscape, what do you see going forward in your work plan for training and resources for crew to be most effective at dealing with this?
So I mean,
Even auxiliaries, I guess at a certain point.
yeah. So all our first responders are trained in the administration of naloxone, which is kind of a first responders were never allowed to deliver any sort of medications. Nelson, we were actually, I think, the first or second fire department in British Columbia that signed up for the pilot project when the opioid epidemic was originally came to light. Plans for the future for dealing with it and the training. We are getting our whatever firefighter that we have that reaches their 1001, we're contemplating getting them FR certified. And then so with that comes what they can do.
Right. FR being first responder.
Okay. That's what you
And
do.
I I know that creates a question. There's gonna be a lot of firefighters that don't have their first responder, and the reason for that is because all that training is a time commitment, and we wanna make sure that, obviously, if the person's gone through their 1001, they're committed to staying with the department. But there's a lot of people that come on with the department for 6 months or a year and retire. So we want to try to give the advanced training to the members that are sticking around in the community. And, there's just so many hours. And,
Yeah, that makes sense. A supplemental there. I presume this is the case, but how are you taking the monitoring that you guys are doing around and disseminate that back out to the social sector,
So
the
we
groups
sit-
that are on the front line of that particular
Yeah,
issue?
we sit on the committee, the Fentanyl Task Force
Okay.
Committee, and so we share our feedback.
Yeah.
It's often the shift officer that is attending the meeting, and, they're the boots on the ground people. Unfortunately, sometimes they get pulled away from the committee meeting because they're responding to calls, so.
Okay.
But, yeah, we are working with the, and then emergency management is working with, like, Nelson Cares and Cares and all that sort of stuff. Beach workers and all that sort of thing as well, so, we work with them, and share our data.
Okay. Thank you.
They meet, the fentanyl task force does meet monthly, and currently I'm on their invite this. They extended that out to me as the new mayor and dismissed the other things were more pressing here in the city of Nelson. But because those meetings are, they're very informative. Basically, they're just a round table, and everybody gets to go and report. And the nice thing about the meeting, I think, and perhaps you can confirm this, it seems to me that this meeting used to be a smaller group, and now it's a larger group because we are trying to develop connections with Trail and Castlegar. And so there are service providers that are attached to those communities that participate. And again, it's a fairly large group, whether or not everybody can make it all the time, but because of the frequency of them, you're not probably that far behind. It's not like it's a quarterly meeting or once every 6 months. Because it's monthly, just because you're not there 1 month, you're caught up right away. The notes are comprehensive that come back. And so it's a good group, and everybody is struggling with the issue of toxic drug supply and overdoses. So.
They do a really good job of drug testing and advanced warning to emergency services. So when we see that there is a potentially dangerous new drug in town, we get some good advanced warning, and we will see an increase in call volume, usually right after it or during the middle of it. Just reading my little notes here on the side to make sure I'm getting all the little points here. So I have a note here on retreatments. Like, we've been doing wildfire mitigation work for, it's kind of weird. Yeah, I know, but then my notes, never mind, there they are. Just learning the software.
Nailed it.
Don't mind me. I know how to click a button.
Did that.
All right, here we are.
Figure out what that button does.
Yep. Nelson Fire Rescue Services respond to 121 wildfire interface calls between 2018 and 2022, obviously of varying severity. All members are both career and auxiliary trained in wildfire interface fires. That's structural protection training that we recertify every year. And then we have community wildfire preparedness plans and mitigation campaigns that reduce the risk. So we have a whole suite of grant-funded projects that are geared around our wildfire risk. It's never-ending, overwhelming, very busy. So grant-funded projects such as the Fire Smart project and the Fire Smart Coordinator, the Ackerman report, any grant-funded BC Parks work that we've been able to coordinate with them on. Retreatments, which is important. We've done some really good mitigation work inside the city. Our ability to do mitigation work, how do I put this? Burlington Northern train tracks is pretty much the city boundary, and so there's wildfire risk inside the city due to timber transport, and so some of our parks, areas that we own above the cemetery, there's a piece of provincial land above Mount St. Francis. Those are all and various small portions of land that you drive by every day and don't even really realize it. And so we've had a lot of those assessed and mitigated since 2008. Now we're in a retreatment phase where we're going to be doing reassessments. You know, the windstorms that we've been having haven't been helping our mitigation work, where now we just have a lot of blowdown. So it's really important that we treated those areas, but now we need to study those areas and prioritize which ones we now go and retreat. And so we've been talking with the youth climate corps, and they might be a good organization to partner up with and pursue grant funding to help them, to work with them to retreat some of these areas, because a lot of the working with, obviously, will employ some dangerous tree fallers and stuff like that, clear the hazards, and then the rest is work that they can handle without too much of a hazard. And so that's encouraging. It's exciting. We might be able to get a lot of really good work done on some of those retreatments using those connections. Okay, so this slide, the next slide is actually interesting. This thing's not playing nice. All right. Other significant work completed. All right, 2018. Obviously, a disaster day is a day where we get everybody, really. Regional district fire departments, the municipal fire departments. Now the tongue twister. BC Wildfire, BC Parks, Ministry of Environment, Transit, BC Ambulance, everybody. And the last time it was held at Ward Street, Ward and Baker, and Hall Street in Baker. And it's just basically a huge trade show that people are welcome to come through and learn whatever they need to learn about the services that these individual organizations can provide. So that's Disaster Day. That'll be happening again in 2023. Fire Hall Open House. That's not the committee one. Yeah. I'm not going to touch on absolutely every one of these. I'll let you look at them. We'll kind of zoom to 2022 when I know what I'm talking about, because that's when I was hired as the fire chief. Chief McCharles retired and Chief Hebert promoted. News flash, right? Now I can talk about stuff that I actually did instead of stuff that somebody else did. All great work. The Fire Smart Coordinator was hired. Okay, Len did that. I didn't do it. All right. I only get to speak up until May 30th of 2022. After that, I don't know what I'm talking about. New Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan. So that's the transformation from the CWPP to the CWRP. That is in progress. I believe it's going to be finalized. We're looking at draft copies, talking with the consultants currently, and I believe it's going to be released in March. We have a feasibility study in progress for a new fire hall. I'm not sure if this has been articulated. Because we like grants, there's actually a grant that New for 2022 actually included fire halls in the list of approvable projects. So we're gonna try and line ourselves up and see what happens. In order to apply for the grant, you need to have a feasibility study. So we're in the process of doing that right now. Our current fire station is 110 years old. It was remarkably cheap when we built it. $17,800 or $17,600 when we built that fire hall. The new one will cost hundreds of dollars more.
Can't even rent an apartment for you.
Yeah, it's an amazing fire hall. It's beautiful. We have people come from all over the world to see it. The movie Roxanne helped a lot, by the way, still does. But we've got our money worth out of it. So we're looking at moving forward and having a look at this feasibility study is going to assess what we have, what our needs are, and possibly where. But
Yeah, I was just thinking as you're talking, I'm like, wow, like location. Like it's kind of a challenging location where you are, like getting in and out, pulling in. It's a neighborhood. It's
it's not fun in the winter.
right.
Yeah.
So
So that will be part of the study is making an assessment of and I believe Sam, I'll talk about it, but I mean the facilities manager will also be talking about it, so you'll kind of hear it from a couple of different sides. The feasibility study is right now is looking at what we have, what we need, what we have, and how doesn't it apply to any kind of known standard, and how does that relate into what we need. The footprint, it then creates a footprint, and then we can take that footprint and try to apply it to either pieces of property that the city owns, or with the consultants in the feasibility study doing assessment of response times and basically determining, okay, this is where we can put a fire hall, but is this where we should put a fire hall? Because we're looking at building a fire station for tomorrow, and got to look into trends about how the city's growing and all that sort of stuff. So that's why we hire the professionals.
right, and it's interesting because I think we have the library looking at a new build, and then of course the police department I think is pretty crammed in there, and like fire department. So I'm wondering about collaborative situation there.
I mean,
And library, I'm sorry, library is on its own. I'm just saying that there's these major branches of the city that are looking.
I think there's every concept that should be entertained. The unfortunate thing is the grant says fire departments, not police departments, right in it. And I'm like, I don't know why they're singling it out, but I mean, maybe in 2023 that language changed. Like it only took one grant year for them to say, hey, let's do fire halls. So as things happen, maybe new opportunities and new synergies can be made. But I mean, we're still in the feasibility study. I mean, we don't even have the feasibility. We're just going through the motions to actually create the study now. So we'll hopefully the experts will come up with a good document, and it'll help guide us going forward. But it'll allow us to take advantage of some grant funding. So that's the fire hall feasibility study ordered. So engine 7, which is one of our pumper trucks, has been ordered and is going to be showing up in 2023. I got pictures of the cab being painted, so it's nice to see that. That was a long process. It was complicated by a lot of things, not to mention the Canadian dollar, aluminum tariffs, work shortages, COVID, all sorts of things just really hampered the process. So it's good. It is going to be en route. And then you'll see next to the note on that one, service life extension for ladder truck. So our ladder truck was actually scheduled to be replaced in time. No, it's actually 5 years past its expiry date because we were able to apply for a 5-year service life extension. So it's 1997, so 2027 is when it's due to be replaced now. 30 years. So we took a 20-year truck, and due to going through the legwork and the homework and showing good maintenance records and building a case to the fire underwriters, we were able to extend it for the first 5 years, and then we just got the paperwork that extended the life of that apparatus to 30 years, which is phenomenal. I mean, it's an expensive truck, but to be able to say that you have a working piece of apparatus that the insurance underwriters is confident is going to do it, I mean, that's amazing.
Isn't a new ladder truck about 1.7 million or something? It's more
No,
than that.
well, I mean, if you would ask, literally, I mean, if you would ask me last year, I would have agreed with you.
Right.
But things have just absolutely gone sideways on any kind of purchase.
There is a capital reserve for that truck. So with this extension, do you just keep adding that to the capital reserve as we go along?
Yeah, so I think it gives us the ability to budget for its replacement. I mean, I'm not the finance guy.
Yeah.
We have our equipment reserve.
Right.
It funds all of our vehicles, and yeah, Jody will be coming to talk about that, so equipment replacement plan, and that'll be one of the elements of that, but, we only put 900,000 a year into the equipment reserve. This fire truck's 2.3 million.
I swear it was 1.7
Yeah,
million
no,
like a
it's,
moment ago.
If,
You
if
prob-
I'm not,
prob-
if I'm not incorrect, CFO jury, I believe that we usually carry that as I wanna call it a parcel tax, but it's, it shows up, the last fire truck showed up as a special, is it classified as a parcel
Debt
tax, or
service.
it's a,
We added a debt servicing tax, like an additional
yeah,
small tax. to
it showed
fund
up
that.
on your property tax, which you wouldn't be, cause it's a city thing. But it's there to pay for the fire truck, and it was on there for, a number of times for years to pay for the last fire truck, 'cause I remember when it came.
Yeah, so that's the
Okay.
truck, and so probably the last budget presentation.
Yeah.
It probably would have been in that
Yeah.
ballpark, but due to the way just the whole economy is going and the price of the fire trucks, we readjusted the number to be a little bit more realistic than be caught with not enough funding.
But now we have 5 more years.
Yes. Yeah.
The costs will continue to rise too, I imagine.
You never know.
Chief, how are we doing there in terms of how many more slides do you have, do you think?
3, I think.
3? Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
And then
Okay.
Emergency management piece.
Yeah, yeah.
Get me talking.
I do wanna take, when you're done, I do wanna let us have a break,
Yeah.
so.
Okay, sure. I will be faster. So what do we do in 2022? Training, rope rescue training for 2 new members, so they went away and got trained. Fire investigator 1 and 2 for one of our members. Obviously, because people have retired and moved into other positions, this is just filling some gaps in professional development. Emergency scene management 2 for 2 members, and then incident command 300. And then 2023 is just going to be even more. That's just over and above. Work plan for 2023, looking forward. Okay, so we got to do the RDCK Fire Protection and Assistance Response Agreement, which we've got a 6-month extension to complete that work. And the fire underwriters survey portal profile. So that's them between us submitting documents to them and them coming to do a firsthand look at the city to make sure that all their information and what they're basing their calculations on are accurate. The new fire apparatus, we already talked about engine 7. We have a utility vehicle, which is affectionately known as FR, so First Responder 3, are due to be replaced, arriving in 2023. Feasibility studies. So we have Community Wildfire Resiliency Plan, which should be finished in around February or March. The new fire hall feasibility study, which we were just talking about. These three, so we have community, let me talk about the residential sprinkler, community-wide residential sprinkler deployment. So that was a grant that we applied for at the last, so was it CBT or EBC? It's a CBT CRI. So that's a study on the water system to see its capacity and what the effect of supplying every residence in the city of Nelson with a residential sprinkler system for interface wildfire would do. So it's a study to study that. All right. So that was a pre-existing to my administration. I fully support it. The next two are my brainchild. One is a feasibility study and design of what could possibly be called a community interface suppression system, which would actually be a deployable line of sprinklers up to possibly 1 to 2 kilometers long that we could deploy either around a community or alongside the Burlington Northern if indeed we were faced with an ember shower or a fire front, that we could deploy this system and supply it. So the study is to study the feasibility of that, the water supply system, and then so we are applying for the grant funding. Public Works Colin Innes is sourcing out the proper consultants to do the work. So working with the other departments to try and put wildfire as a priority. Then the other one is the 5 Mile water line, which has a replacement, there's a replacement plan in the works for it, but we don't know what the afterlife is of the existing water line, and can it be repurposed as a wildland interface protection system that basically cuts across one of our most vulnerable slopes at BC Parks land. So the grant study is to look at that.
So is this that in a wildfire situation, you could deploy this and then you could feed it with water not necessarily going through the city system, but coming directly from a creek, from a reservoir? Or are you still pulling from the city system?
In the event of an emergency, I think there's different options. I think there's, the original concept was pulling out of the water system and to see if the water system can handle it. But I think there's different options that are available as we move forward with our water management plan. So,
Because it would seem like if you're just fighting fire, you could pull it from
Yeah, well, that would be
your source rather than just the reservoir here.
yeah, so we run into hydraulics and difficulties with hydraulics and pumping and friction loss and all that sort of stuff. So I mean, we do have hydrants strategically located along the Burlington Northern in some spots now. So the original concept was to capitalize on that. The gravity-fed, short distance from the fire hall, low amount of friction loss, and the Burlington Northern is an amazing asset for wildfire. But I mean, we'll know more when the studies are done and look at our different options. Yeah. So.
Thank you.
All right, so that's the feasibility studies. Community connection and events, wildfire risk reduction open house in June, disaster day in May, fire prevention, school programs, so that's an annual ongoing program. Fire smart programs and wildfire mitigation, interagency training, that we do annually. Actually, we got an interagency training evolution where we're looking for grant funding to support the work with BC Wildfire Regional District and do live burning at a parcel that we've identified and has been recommended by BC Wildfire. Wildfire mitigation demonstration sites. What do we got for that one? Yeah, there's a ton of those ones. Is the goats in there?
Yay for the goats.
Hey, it's
need
not
the goats.
specifically listed here, but I think the goats are cool, so we're gonna try the goats, all right? So, we applied for a grant to actually, and this company comes with 130 to 140 goats, fences,
A shepherd.
shepherd, thank you, multiple shepherds. I was struggling to remember what a goat herder was.
Well, goat herd, I guess, is more.
And they're gonna graze the interchange at the right time. And so we're gonna see if it's effective and if that's what it needs. If they have any effect on the weed mat that exists underneath it, or how that all works. But they've done it they did it in Merritt, and I believe they did it in Kimberley.
She's from Kimberley, so they've done it along this hill there, and then they've also done it in Calgary along the highway as well. So it's called grazing. It's a mitigation tactic that is slowly coming to the forefront. She suggested that all the municipalities should actually buy their own herds so that we could do this annually. So we can think about that.
We need another department.
The GO department.
Well, I have some expertise here, so you can start with a small number
Yeah,
of
you
them.
do.
You can start with a small number of them, and they will increase. Just keep feeding them.
They do that.
Yeah, they have a tendency to do
Just keep
that.
grazing them.
We're all very excited about that.
I think it's going to be very
From fire
public.
to sex, we covered all at
We
City
covered,
Hall.
it's all there.
Did you have a question?
I do. I,
Counselor Tate, sorry.
given you're looking to hopefully have another $323,000 in grant funding from 2022 to 2023, what would you like to be doing differently with that bigger chunk of change?
Are we on the right slide for that?
I don't know where you're getting that.
Oh, she's
from
looking
the-
at,
From
Going
the
back
top.
From the grant funding
Yeah,
that you
in
applied.
2022 was 286, and in 2023 we're hoping for 610.
Right, so the Reddit grant, 180,
Yeah.
is for a position at the fire hall. So
Oh,
that's a
okay.
different. And then, similar to what the chief said, all the grants, we're seeing increases across the board.
Yeah.
Which we anticipate will continue to go up with the threat of wildfire and the prevention of priority on wildfire mitigation and
Okay.
fire smart. So the grants went up $50,000, both the CBT and the CRI from UBCM, but the CBT is actually a new grant that wasn't available previously, and they're wanting to focus on the Columbia Basin area, partly because it's high risk and partly because the government just has more money to offer, and so CBT is managing those funds. So normally we were just applying for one grant under the UBCM for our Fire Smart program and wildfire mitigation. Now we're able to apply for 2 grants, totaling
Okay.
$400,000. So
So a new position and more wildfire mitigation.
that's right.
Thank you.
And emergency planning.
Okay. Thank you.
yeah, so I think it's worth mentioning, if you remember the first slide, there was that,
I
on
remember.
the organizational breakdown, there was the little thing where it said, new position.
Uh-huh.
So we are attempting on getting grant funding for that position. However, it's a grant, so we may or may not be approved for it. So
Right.
we'll speak more to it in the emergency management side. But
Okay.
we are making attempts through creative funds, sourcing of funds to try and compensate for the cost of that position.
Yeah.
And so we've submitted a grant. We don't know if we're gonna be approved for it.
Yeah.
It could be a little bit of a stretch, but I mean, it fits, so
Cool.
we're trying our best.
As we do.
All right, okay, work plan for 2024. Sorry, there's a lot of stuff going on here.
Sorry, Chief, before you go, the training section here,
Oh, sorry, I'm gonna back up. Training, yeah.
I don't see,
Oh,
I was wondering, is there wildfire training for urban firefighters?
Yes, we do that annually. We have train the trainers in it. It's called the SPPWFF1. You'll be required to recite that back to me later on this afternoon.
Do we need to know, Jesse, really?
It just seems like that's gonna be, especially for a town like us.
Yes, yeah, we do it annually. And then, so, in the training here, so, sorry, I kind of glazed over that one. There's obviously the training we're doing for succession planning, the hazmat technician training, which is grant funded, confined space, which we're hoping is gonna be grant funded as well. Technical high angle rope rescue, which is funded under the TARP program, and then our new auxiliaries. So that's that, but there's also the BC Wildfire Symposium on Wildland Urban Interface, which is a huge suite of training programs. So we can actually apply for grant funding to send firefighters away to get that training, to bring it back to our communities and make everything better.
Thank you.
All right, work plan for 2027. This, Amy made this beautiful slide for us, so so obviously the technical high angle rope rescue training that we're gonna be doing, we're sending more people away for train the trainers. so that we have more capacity in the event that we actually get called to perform those services. So 2024 auxiliaries, oh yeah, okay, I was talking about the Youth Climate Corps partnership options, then the High Angle Rope Rescue, sorry, I'm jumping all over the place. 2026 is the ladder truck replacement, it's 2.3 million. So as you'll see here, it's slated for 2026, 2027. So the consensus was because of the supply chain issues and the delays and how long it takes to build some of this, we're planning on building it so that we're receiving it in 2026, so that our insurance rates we don't run a risk of our insurance rates falling behind if for some reason due to those issues it was late coming in 2027. So it's just a little bit of strategic planning so that we're prepared.
Can I ask where the FR3 is on this plan?
2023. It's
Yeah.
coming this year.
Oh,
It's
okay,
paid
we're
for
in
last year.
2024, okay, got it.
Okay, interagency training, which we touched on in the last slide. We will have touched on all these in the last slide. Fire prevention school program and succession planning. And then 2027 is the tender truck replacement, which I will try my best to also get a service life extension on. But we've already heard from fire underwriters that because we have a superior tanker shuttle service that is pivotal of having those tender trucks in peak condition, that they're hesitant. But I believe I can build an argument that if they were getting extended truck, that's the one to do. So try my best to defer those costs as well. All right, 18, 19. Okay, we're gonna dive into this one a little bit on.
You do talk about it in the next.
We do, so we
want to just put it all.
So with everybody's approval, I mean, this is going to get touched to more in depth at the end of the executive, at the end of the emergency management portion. And then, questions?
Any other questions? It's a pretty fulsome presentation.
Sorry about that.
No,
That was
that's
great.
that's why we
Great.
have these meetings. This is exactly
Yeah.
why we
great.
have these meetings, is that we wanted to have all the information, so then when Chris comes with the numbers, we understand what the numbers relate to. Without this background, the numbers mean absolutely nothing to us. So thank you very much for that, Chief. And just want to make sure, are there any other questions from anyone that come to mind? As you know, when you get to take it home and look at it again, that you can always, through myself and the CAO, we can route any questions and make sure that then everybody hears the question and receives the answer if something comes up as you review the material again. So thank you for that, Chief. We're going to take a brief break here for 15 minutes
Absolutely.
to refresh the coffees and whatever.
Yes, but I'm just kidding.
Oh, okay. You turned them off, or?
I wasn't even paying attention to see if you had any questions, so I apologize.
No, I was watching to
Oh.
see that there was the potential that every now and then I would look up there because Rick can put his hand up, but this comes up as like a little number in the corner, and I'm sure that Jesse or Keith might have caught it. There he is.
Rick?
Okay.
Can't see anymore.
Okay, so everybody's back, and we are going to continue now with a presentation from emergency management. And just so people are aware, we are going to move administration and human resources to next week's budget presentations to be timely today. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, so,
All important work.
back to you, Chief Burt.
Okay, so now I'm going to take off my fire chief hat and put on my director of emergency management hat. Done. All right. So this is the other department that I head up, is the Department of Emergency Management. Oh.
Okay.
All right, that's the first slide. Organizational chart's much smaller. It's myself as the Fire Chief, Director of Emergency Management, and John Topolovic, the Emergency Management Coordinator. As we were alluding to on the fire slide, there is the desire to staff a new position, which will be split between emergency management and fire, affectionately known as the new executive assistant position. We will be getting into more of that towards the end of the presentation. And I'll try and not, these slides don't contain as much information. So bylaws, policies, and guiding documents. So basically, there's no federal regulations that govern emergency management. It's all provincial regulated. And so the provincial documents are the Emergency Program Act, the Local Authority Emergency Management Regulation, Emergency Program Management Regulation, and the Compensation and Disaster Financial Assistance Regulation. There's going to be a big revamping on the Emergency Program Act. It's in the works right now, and so that's the modernization of that provincial emergency legislation is really going to put more onus on the municipalities and the owners of critical infrastructure to make sure that their preparedness, they're basically taking all the 4 pillars of emergency management into consideration, and we'll get into what all that means in the next slide. And then we have our municipal bylaws and policies, which are the Emergency Management Program Bylaw, Emergency Management Review Report recommendations, HRBA assessment, or analysis, Emergency Management Program Plan, and the Emergency Response Plans, which are, there's a whole suite of those. Okay, what is emergency management? There's 4 pillars of emergency management: mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And they don't all have to happen or be planned in that order, but that's the basis of the 4 pillars, and it can be applied across the board. Significant work since 2018. So 2018 is when the City of Nelson split for the regional district emergency management program so that we could better look after our own interests. And so 2018 involved a ton of grant work, as you can see by the little cards there. And it was basically the building of the Emergency Operations Center. Through 2019, hiring an emergency management coordinator. And then 2020 was actually operational with activations. A bunch of plans were developed. You can see there the pandemic recovery plan, emergency program plan, critical infrastructure plan, and shelter in place and re-entry plan. Let's see if there's anything else somebody knows before I move on.
Question from Councilor Tate.
I do, I'm sorry. Through the chair. When you get these new positions that are grant funded and they have the nice little icon there, what happens in the subsequent years? Is the grant designed to last a number of years, or?
So that stuff there that you're seeing here wasn't grant funded positions, it was grant funded projects.
Okay.
Speaking to positions, so currently we have a grant coordinator who's grant funded.
Yeah.
We've applied for grant funding this year.
Yeah.
And going forward, UCM is requiring a fire smart position in order to be able to apply for grant funding.
Okay.
So we're assuming that they will be funding that as its a requirement.
It actually says in their grant, if you want to continue to receive UBCM funding, then apply for a fire smart coordinator. So it's kind of a lot of their grant. So yeah, the fire smart coordinator position right now is the only grant funded position that we have.
Okay.
The stuff on this slide here is grant funding to build the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center. This is emergency management.
But Kate, I believe you're speaking to the executive assistant.
No, I'm looking at 2019 hire EM coordinator, and it has the little icon.
Oh, there's one here. Hire EM coordinator with additional capacity and support. That might be a misplaced document.
Thank you. Okay, no problem. Okay.
No, it was actually, it's
Clarify, that was that initially came, our initial money to hire a John did come through a grant
I think that was,
initially, I
Dave.
believe.
Sorry, that was, initially it was grant funding, but it was grant funding for Chief McCharles to spend half of his time to work on EM.
Yes.
And so the grant funding was actually for a probationary firefighter to cover the assistant chief acting as chief and the chief acting as director of emergency
But it
management.
was a grant.
Gotcha.
It all started,
Okay.
it all started with a grant. Isn't that like, isn't there it all started with a cruise and they ran ashore, but mostly we're not gonna run ashore.
No, please.
I gotcha.
Especially back
Especially
then,
in
it was
emergency
grant.
management.
Yes, so I guess in a weird convoluted way, there was a position that was grant funded.
I get it.
Yeah. Sorry about
I
that.
got that.
All right, I'm just gonna jump to the next slide. So significant work completed in 2021. Community recovery for COVID-19. Work with HR to develop city communicable disease plan. Business continuity plan for local business and city departments. The version 1 of the heat response plan. Fully launched the new public emergency notification system, which is Voyant Alert, and preparedness campaign focused on households and pets. That was from 2021. 2021 was an intensive wildfire year across the province with a large number of fires in the regional district. So EM personnel were fairly busy monitoring the situation and working on advanced planning. Largely the same thing happened in 2022 as well. Actually, it just happened a little later in the year.
Just can't believe those nighttime temperatures.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was something. So yeah, heat wave cooling centers were open to the seniors and the curling club to support the community, as well as there were other stakeholders were opening some cooling centers for their clients as well.
Councillor Payne has a question.
Can I just ask what the response was to the heat cooling centers during the heat?
I'll let John speak to that because he
Okay.
was actually manning them himself.
Not in 2021.
Oh, sorry.
Or
John.
are we in 2020?
We were,
Oh,
but
sorry,
I
I see.
can speak to 2022.
Okay.
So my understanding is that there wasn't a whole lot of uptake in the public cooling centers that were activated. And we can get into that after 2022 in version
Okay.
2 of our heat
Yep.
response plan, where
Perfect.
we learned from some of those experiences and tried to cater or tailor is a better word, tailor our public communications to other facilities rather than standing up dedicated ones.
I think some of the biggest challenges was an appropriate facility that had,
Storm needs to be,
that had air conditioning, that had adequate access for people with mobility issues, that was close to public transportation routes, and all that sort of stuff were huge challenges. And between 2021 and 2022, we've tried various locations to see which ones work the best. And people in the Kootenays are very resilient, and I mean it's not uncommon for us to have the odd day that's 40 degrees. Those overnight temperatures were something out of the norm, but didn't seem to be to the point where people were taking advantage of the resources that were made available. Anyways, we can move into more of that when we get into the slides here. So 2022, significant work complete. 2022 with the delayed snow melt and above average snowpack, the flood risk was elevated, so there was a lot of time spent on working with Public Works and monitoring the freshet. Luckily, everything worked out. We were close, but we didn't end up having to activate the EOC. But we did pre-stage some equipment and ordered more sandbags and all that sort of stuff in preparation. Read through here some of these so that we don't beat it all to death. We did evacuation route planning and training. You can see it's grant funded, so hired a consultant to review and update the evacuation plan which also included a tabletop exercise and a functional evacuation exercise where we teamed up with Nelson Fire Career and Auxiliary members, teamed up with Nelson Search and Rescue, and did a mock evacuation of 12 square blocks. The location was central to the fire hall because it was just logistically easier. So we did that, and then take that data to kind of design how we are going to do evacuations in the city. That was good. The Steep Creek hazard assessments, John can speak to that. I believe City Council was fairly aware of.
Yeah, so we had a workshop, but essentially we're at a high level looking at potential hazards for steep creeks in and around the community. From that, we're working in collaboration with other departments, and then applying the recommendations from the consultants to then do more in-depth studies and look at how we can potentially apply some mitigation efforts to ultimately protect residents and structures in and around creeks.
And that's, a large part of that is working with the regional district because a lot of those creeks originate in the RD and then either come through the city or, I think they all do actually come through the cities. And then obviously update the various plans, which is ongoing, which is one of the three listed here, the emergency response plan, the drinking water emergency response plan with Public Works, and the heat response plan version 2.0.
Question on Councilor?
So those plans are available on our website, are they?
They're not at the moment.
Okay, I'm just not familiar with the drinking water emergency response plan. It's the new one.
Yeah,
for
that
me.
one is held by Public Works, and I just assisted with updating some of the data, and ultimately what sort of the idea going forward is that Public Works and myself will sit down and actually go through the plan in a bit more wholesome. There's a responsibility for annual updates, but whether or not there's been a full review as to whether or not the plan still fulfills the need of of the city in an emergency response specific to drinking water challenges. That's something that we still need to go through and review and make sure that it's actually a usable document.
So do you have any idea, John, when that will be available?
I don't.
I'll put down 6 months and then I'll,
I can follow up how this works and see.
Yeah.
just interested. I mean, it is pretty relevant to life on the planet. Thank you.
So these are the, in the fire presentation, we showed all the grants we're doing with the fire side. This is the grants that we're doing with the emergency management side. More and more grants as emergency management is becoming a larger and larger provincial priority. More and more grants are becoming available. And so a lot of it is training. We've always got the group planning one. 2023, there's a slide for 2023, or we haven't submitted for those yet.
Again, you see it in investments and training, and another one.
Public notification evacuation. Yeah.
Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. So it really seems like the province is kind of front-loading a lot of this emergency management. They want municipalities to be, as sort of ready to go as possible. Do you feel like that's going to continue? I would imagine.
Oh, they're mandating it.
They're mandating.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
it's sorry, I'll let you speak.
I was going to say, so historically, the Emergency Program Act, which is, what governs us, provincial legislation, and along with the regulations, they primarily focus on recovery and response efforts. Whereas now with the modernized legislation, they're incorporating all 4 pillars, and they're using wording like required and subject to audit and other more aggressive language to hold municipalities and regional districts accountable for having more wholesome plans for all 4 pillars, which you know, for a program that, you know, is only 4-ish years old, the number of turnover in those 4-ish years, it creates a significant workload going forward to ensure that we're meeting those.
Thank you.
And they even get pointy and point fingers at the owners of critical infrastructure. So, I mean, City Nelson being as forward-thinking as they are, I mean, we have our own sewage treatment plant that we're responsible for, our own hydroelectric utility, our own, you know, water intakes and water treatment and fire department. We got our own municipal department. I mean, those are all critical infrastructure. And so in the new modernized Emergency Program Act, they're basically mandating that all those things have to have their individual.
So we're actually, as a municipality, we're carrying a fairly heavy load because we have so many of these critical infrastructure.
It definitely loads the emergency management program. Yeah, it puts more load on it than other municipalities would have to if they don't have those critical infrastructures.
I mean, it's good for us because we are able to respond to our own
Oh, for sure,
emergencies.
yes.
But it means that we have to be up to speed as possible, I guess.
Yeah, we just have to have the appropriate plans in place.
Thank you.
All right. Training highlights. Again, lots of grant-funded stuff here. So evacuation route planning, touched on that. That was 12 square blocks, 160 address points. It was NPD, search and rescue, Nelson Emergency Management, Nelson Fire together. And we operated out of the fire hall, which was converted into a tactical operations center. And we were able to gather lots of valuable information. Yeah, we took that information and we included it in our updated emergency evacuation plan. So, good. Void alert. John, if you want to just touch on void alerts, I know you are, you operated, so.
Intimately
Yeah.
familiar.
Yeah.
So Void Alert is our emergency notification system that was adopted in 2020. Is that correct? Formerly Everbridge, 2021. So essentially, it is a voluntary registration notification system. Residents are able to sign up and receive notifications that are distributed from the Emergency Management Department through text, through voice, phone, through email, or they can download the app and receive it that way. At the moment, we have 6,500 residents who have registered, but because of an import from the previous system, there's 8,000 people in there, and essentially what we have to do is, or what I need to do coming up in the spring is extend the notification to ensure that people who have registered wish to continue receiving those, so that I can integrate the additional 1,500 into the voluntary registration piece. So the notifications that I can distribute are only within the municipal boundary. I can't send them into the regional district, like our geographical boundary that I can send, I kind of have in a map up there. So there's a pretty important collaboration piece with the regional district, who also operate the emergency notification system through Void Alert. So that's something that I work with their emergency program coordinator with, is, you know, okay, if we do have, you know, an incident that, you know, chooses not to abide by jurisdictional boundaries and go from one into the other, how do we coordinate our messaging so that one group of people isn't receiving a message, you know, 2 hours after another group just because of an imaginary line. We are in line with, like I said, the Regional District of Central Kootenay, who uses this, Regional District Kootenay Boundary, Regional District of East Kootenay, and a lot of other authorities throughout British Columbia and Canada use this system. It's great. They're available 24/7 for support. And if we're busy in the EOC, they will actually craft, Void Alert the company will actually craft and distribute messages on our behalf with our approval, so it alleviates some of the workload for us during an emergency. We do send a test notification annually, generally during Emergency Preparedness Week. And the training exercise or the evacuation exercise that we did was a component of that was actually administering one of these emergency notifications. So of those 167 address points that were inside that exercise area, 199 devices received a notification within that section. So that's pretty good. It means that multiple devices were registered within a household, which is great. And yeah, I mean it's a very intuitive system. They just rolled out their version 2.0, so hoping that I can arrange for some staff training in the spring here prior to natural hazard season, so that everyone can be on the same page in case we have to utilize it.
Well, it's interesting that you say prior to natural hazard season. Is there a season around here that is not a natural hazard season? I mean, I don't.
Yeah,
What?
yeah.
A couple weeks. Okay. I'm just wondering because between the snow and the rain and the ice and the avalanche and then
it is
and then the
funny that you say
freshet and the
Yeah.
it seems every year it cycles differently, but I wouldn't say there's a season when we don't have something to look forward to.
Fair.
It's a good point.
Yeah, it is a good point.
Okay,
And I
just
think,
wanted to clarify if I'd missed something because I've only been here for 10 years. So.
yeah, no, you haven't. Now that the hazards or events, we'll call it, are becoming more severe and more frequent, I guess you're right. Yeah, we're always living in natural hazard season. When I think about natural hazard season, I think freshet, fire, and then into sort of the fall storm seasons. But yeah, with the temperature emergencies that we're experiencing, it's sort of a all year round type thing.
All right, community engagement, emergency preparedness week, which is an annual event, disaster day, we touched on that every 2 years. We seek grant funding to make that happen. Business continuity planning presentation for small businesses, John put that together. Learning and retirement presentation on emergency preparedness for seniors, John also developed that presentation and distributed to the retirement communities. Wednesday market presence, we do that when available. That's happens all throughout the summer.
Yeah, so I just basically go when my schedule allows and the Fire Smart booth is set up down there. I go down and try and promote the point alert system and just engage with the community about hazard preparedness and response. And
Yeah, so our Fire Smart coordinator is usually already set up at that market. So John goes down and tries to steal some of her thunder.
exactly.
The Seniors Fair, it's an annual event, and obviously our wildfire risk reduction open house.
Awesome event.
EOC activations, it's just a list of the EOC activations that we've done since 2018. We were close this spring on high water, but we were both very into monitoring water levels, and so I mean you could almost say we were activated at level 1 because we were spending so much time monitoring water levels, but we never actually activated it. I guess we could have just to say we did. Anyways, that's just a list of those there. The HRVA, Hazard Risk and Vulnerability Analysis, which is an extremely important document. We did this in 2019, and because the province is good at messing things up, they're revamping the whole thing and with a new tool and a new template. So we have to now do a reassessment of it and put it into this standardized format, which takes a significant amount of time. Plus, at the same time, reevaluating to make sure that the hazards and risks are still the same, and maybe mitigation work has made it better. Maybe in some areas, lack of mitigation work has made it worse. So it's a significant amount of work that needs to happen for that, and so that's going to be something that we're gonna probably look at applying for grant funding to help do that. If we take this on, that's pretty much the only thing we'll be doing for that year. So if we can source out grant funding to help alleviate some of that burden, then we're gonna take advantage of that. But it's on our plate. And that's what it is. And so it's a matrix that basically identifies the likelihood of an incident happening, what the incident is, what the likelihood of it happening, and the consequence, and it rates it on a matrix. Emergency Management Planning Committee. So this is the is this the regional district one, or is this the city one?
This is ours.
Yeah, so there's two planning committees, there's the regional district one, which we sit on, and then there's the city of Nelson one. So, okay, copy that, if I can just look at the list of people. So Director of Emergency Management, the City Manager, Director of Development Services, Corporate Services, Director of Public Works, Fire Chief, the Police Chief, City Council Representative, I believe. I think it is, yeah, I think it is. That's probably what I was referring to then when we were talking at the break. Manager IT and Corporate Communications. So then, yeah, the goals of that committee are to do quarterly, create an EM culture, cultivate resiliency, opportunity for interdepartment collaboration, and a roundtable for department preparedness. Go ahead.
I'm just interested what an EM culture is. Is it sort of like the Boy Scouts Be Prepared? Is that what we're talking about?
John, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's what, promoting an emergency management culture, so being, whether that's as an organization, so in, the City of Nelson staff, whether that's people being engaged in emergency operations center training and understanding that, if something big and bad happens, we're only two people and we're likely going to be pulling on others to come assist us based on their skill set within the organization. And then similarly, integrating that emergency management culture into the community and giving people the tools to make themselves resilient in their own way, whether that's having their own emergency plans, the grab and go bags, staying informed, whether that's providing them with resources and the ability to understand what's happening in and around our area, specifically in wildfire season. That's one of the things that is at the forefront of everyone's mind. Understanding how to receive emergency alerts, and then just being there to answer questions that people need in preparation for the hopefully unlikely event that there is a significant emergency.
Hope for the best, not for the worst.
Yeah. So if I can just add on to that, one of my areas of focus would be what I would call the vulnerable population. So I've worked with a lot of seniors who don't have cell phones to get Voyant Alert and don't necessarily have people in town, like family in town. Are we mapping in some way? How are we making sure that we know where those seniors are, but also you'll have mums with young children, low-income mums with young children who may not have the transportation or the resources. Do we have any community engagement piece that holds that, or is it still sort of hoping your community will, your neighborhood will come together around you? And are we thinking that forward?
Well, it's very challenging to maintain enough data lists of where people, and keep track of where people are. And so, I mean, providing people with the tools to, hopefully, and communicating, really, we are relying and trying to empower people within the community to be resilient and help their neighbors. But to be frank, we don't have the resources to manage that administrative piece. There will be, if it comes down to, for instance, a transportation piece, that's something that'll be worked on during the emergency operations center. We will be pre-identifying, areas that people can go and transportation needs to get them from one community to where the reception center is. And I'm referring specifically to evacuation needs. So there will be those processes being worked on at the time, but it's like it really depends on what the actual event is to be able, like, there's no real cutter.
We have, John, for the most part, attends a lot of committees and sits and talks a lot with BC Housing, IHA, Anchors, Nelson Cares, all sorts of stuff. And a lot of those vulnerable populations are IHA has connections with a lot of like the elderly people that may or may not even need assistance. So in the event of large scale evacuations and stuff like that, I mean, everybody is gonna be encouraged to try and solve their own problems, but we will also be coordinating with those agencies that are in routine contact with those populations. Are there going to be some people that might slip through the cracks? Absolutely. But that doesn't mean that a phone call to the Emergency Operations Center or a phone call to the fire department, we can't help those people. But the goal is, I mean, if 100 people in the city of Nelson needed assistance from the fire department during a wildfire evacuation when the fire department is out actually fighting the wildfire, that's a lot of people. So the more people that can be self-sufficient through pre-planning and through partnering up with their kind of overarching support groups, the better it is for everybody. But yeah, we fully expect that there's going to be some people that we're going to have to assist, and we're constantly trying to work with other other groups to try and identify those shortcomings. Does that answer your question?
Yep, I just wanna, it's just a concern for me.
You just touched on something. I know that when I was working in community health, is that we have to develop a health plan for every individual that we go to a person's home to see, and that does include what happens in the emergency. And so we do in community health know who our most vulnerable members are, like patients are, clients are, so that we can assist them, knowing full well that they don't have the cell phone, or they don't have the car. So we do have that, and that's where those connections and to me is like the bigger idea of like whether or not we want to call it culture, which always makes me think about bacteria. I used to be a microbiologist. About culture, I think, I'm going to the lab. But that idea of making sure that we have the linkages, and it's questions like you're asking, Councillor Payne, which are really important because sometimes we forget about a group and we kind of go, and it's that aha moment of like, do we have a connection for that? Because yes, we are the city council and we're kind of in charge of the city, but again, we're not in charge of everybody within the city because people get to make their own decisions. But it's, if we see like, never thought about that. I mean, that's where good questions from around the table help our staff make sure that those are covered. But that linkage between the emergency operations center and interior health, because we do have these evacuation notices based on individual clients knowing where they are, and we have put them into play. And it seemed to me that we put some of this into play during the heat dome for checks on clients that we had in the city that we knew that were somewhat at risk. So it does work, and that's that important thing to think that we don't have to solve all the problems because we've got some other agencies that are gonna help us. But it's knowing who the people is. I think in terms of when you're running an operations center, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's not so much knowing where everybody is, it's where knowing where the 10 most important people that you need to know, and that you've actually got the proper contact information for them. And sometimes that is a lot of work in and of itself, of keeping track of 10 organizations and who is their contact now for that, because as we all know, we all get different jobs, we retire, we get promoted, or we're no longer responsible for that job. And that sometimes is work enough just to chase 10 cats, let alone 100 cats. Jesse.
Yeah, so speaking of that, you said before that you'd actually done a mock evacuation of 600 people, and so I imagine that involved vulnerable people and seniors as well. And how did that go?
So it wasn't to the event that we actually got them to board buses. It was what we needed to find out was how long does it take for us to notify, this is in the event of a wildfire, notify a defined area that this is the hazard, this is the time frame, you need to get out, and then for that team to deliver that message, move on to the next house. So we need to know what kind of resources do we need to evacuate this area. And so we didn't actually remove people from their houses and transport them to a site. That was primarily for assessing and getting the message out and being out in the public and to do that side of the mock evacuation.
See.
Once we made the contact, we moved on to the next house. Because that's essentially what we're gonna be doing. We're gonna be either knocking on the door, nobody's home. Knocking on the door, make contact, they refuse. Move on, pass that information to further up the chain, but we can't get bogged down at an individual address and not evacuate the area. Any refusals will be passed on to the police. They'll follow up. They are required by law to evacuate, but it takes way too many resources when everything's happening. They will likely be advised by the police officers in a proper manner that this is the risk. You're basically signing a document saying, I'm not holding anybody responsible for me staying in my house.
This type of evacuation, door-to-door evacuation, where they'd be knocking, explaining the hazard, telling them they need to leave, is after an alert's already been issued, so people know that the hazard's there and that they're advised to either get ready to leave at a moment's notice or they decide to leave already. And then there's also an order that's been evacuation order. So the evacuation order is it's happening, time to get out, you've got 30 minutes. Then the sweep, the door-to-door sweep would happen after that. So it's not like they're coming into the door with them,
Yeah.
understanding the risk and needing to know.
But that mock-up wasn't as comprehensive so that you wouldn't know exactly like who's missing those first alerts and who opens the door and doesn't know what you're talking about and who's completely on board and already has their bags packed. Like that wasn't part of the mock-up.
We collected data on how many of those individuals received the message and were aware. We collected some more data.
We did, so we collected timing data with a certain number of teams, how long it takes to canvass one side of the block. And basically a need for updating our maps because there have been lots subdivided and homes built. So updating address points, and then as Chief had mentioned, we took note of who had been registered for the emergency notification system and received the alert. Who thought they were registered and didn't receive the alert, and who wasn't registered at all, so that we can kind of factor into our public engagement in emergency preparedness week to continue to push that message out about the importance of it.
I think rolling this in too is into that emergency management culture. So, I mean, my hope is that over the last bunch of years with these events that we've had, people are starting to go, okay, I do need a grab and go bag. I do need a plan. Because at the end of the day, we're a small city, but our staff is small and our department, our emergency management staff is small. So people have to actually work together as a neighborhood or a community to get into that mode, or individually at least have some plan. I just hope that that message is getting out and becoming more normalized. So, I mean, at our house, we have a closet. It's just grab and go, and we've ran through a test, how long does it take to get out of our house, and just that kind of stuff. I know not everyone can do it, of course, because there is that issue of mobility or ability, but I'm hoping that a high percentage of people are starting to think in that way.
Just a quick question. Were you asking when you went door to door how many people had grab and go bags?
I don't think that was on the list of questions. It was more about information on what to
Okay.
expect.
Yeah, just interesting. Because I think a lot of people sometimes say they do, meaning that they will get to it.
Right,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. We're like you, Justin.
I'm a warrior.
Okay, we're planning for 2023 to 2027. Obviously, the Emergency Program Act modernization is going to be projected to be finalized in 2023, but sometimes they're a little optimistic. And that's going to influence the direction of the EM program going forward. Community partnership and collaboration, got a bunch of joint training, hazard assessment and mitigation work happening there. We got here. Emergency operations. So we had just a whole suite of training that's happening, as John was alluding to. The Emergency Operations Center is once it's activated, especially at the higher levels, it requires a lot of people to keep it moving. And part of the business continuity is for the Emergency Operations Centers have multiple people trained, because some people aren't available, people are on holidays out of town or whatever. So for every one of the staff positions in the EOC, is going to have multiple layers of depth in order to successfully, upon activation, and be able to operate the EOC through an incident that has multiple operational periods, and start cycling your staff through, or you're going to start burning your staff out when you're in the operations center for 30 days in a row. So that's where that training is pivotal.
Okay, I just touch on one piece in here. There's one course in here that we are working to have hosted, and it's called the EOC Applied Learning course. So this is something that I've been working with the Regional District Central Emergency Program as well as CalCIGAR. And essentially what that course is, or that exercise is, like an EOC activation simulation. So in the spirit of, working together, we're trying to have that, the City of Nelson EOC, the RDCK EOC, and the CalCIGAR EOC sort of all in a joint exercise together, so that we can understand, where the communication challenges would be, what the resourcing challenges might be, because there's a very good chance that the City of Nelson EOC is activated, the RDCK EOC is activated, and one of the closest significant communities is CalCIGAR, so there would possibly be a host community expectation there, or vice versa. So it's a good opportunity for us to come together and work through some of these things rather than try and hopefully do it during actual emergency response.
And then, okay, so we got our community engagement, which is, I think we've touched on the majority of these already. And then plan development updates. I mean, it's endless, and there's probably isn't even. I think it's a optimistic goal to accomplish all this, but it's on the work plan for 2023 to 2027.
Councillor Woodward.
So in the planning development updates there, so I'm wondering about reserve. So I think I spoke about when we were going through that extreme heavy or cold snap there, and that it was kind of like a struggle of if we have to open up a warming center, where's it going to be? Who's going to staff it? Those kind of things. And it does seem like there's an element of a need of an immediate cash stream to let's say open a cooling center or a warming center or emergency shelter. I mean, I'm just wondering how is that navigated? Can you pull funding if you need it in the immediate?
You want to speak to that, or?
I was gonna say, when I read, don't let me be the one to ask this, but emergency BC, is that what it's called?
Yeah, Emergency Management BC.
Thank you.
Well, actually, now it's Emergency Management and Climate Readiness. They just split ministries. So I have to change all my documents.
Change all your
and all my,
letterhead.
and learn a new acronym.
Oh, please, more acronyms.
More
but
acronyms.
There does come a point, when those have to go in, is that triggers us being able to apply to them to cover some of our costs. So yes, do we have to pay, $100 to rent X tomorrow? Yes, well, of course, the city can afford that, but we can recoup those, once these things kick into action through that, program. But there are some steps, like in terms of the cold snap, that we have, because we have shelter beds, they need to be full first.
Right.
And then if we don't have enough of those, and then we have to trigger something else, then we would be eligible for that funding. So, there is funding available, and it comes through whatever the new emergency BC is now called.
Thank you. Yes, I guess it just,
There's other resources in the event, for the cold one, the warming station. There's other avenues that have to be at capacity before the EMBC one will kick in. And for the heat one, the
Yeah.
EMBC one kicks in a lot faster.
okay.
The heat one is actually a little bit of an easier one to fix, because in the evening, when people need to go to bed, temperatures drop. Hopefully, maybe not next year. But in the cold one, when people need to sleep and they're vulnerable and they're out in the streets, the temperature just gets colder and colder. So, but there are already plans in place. Those plans just have to be at capacity before EMBC, whatever they are now. So there's systems in place.
So it's not like we're gonna be going along trying to do emergency management and then hit a wall because we don't know where the funding's coming from. We don't know who's gonna staff it, like,
Not yet.
Well, the staffing piece is always a challenge. I mean, especially when, that's sort of what we run into with, the BC housing side of things and vulnerable populations, as well as our own. I mean, we don't have access in heat emergencies or cold emergencies. We don't have access to the same volunteer base that we do during evacuations. So we don't have access to emergency support services or maybe across through the same avenues that we would. So there's still some pieces that are being worked out. But the call we were on the other day, and I've had another follow-up chat with the Nelson Committee on Homelessness, and we're coming together to create a task force that focuses specifically on emergency planning for the vulnerable populations and emergency response stuff. And there's going to be some pretty critical components to that hopefully put us in a better position going forward for those responses.
great, thank you.
Question from Councillor Kane.
Yeah, and it's just interesting follow-up. My question's basically in the same realm, but it's interesting to me because this last one came earlier and hit and was more intense. But we do get weather forecasts. We know how many there's a named list of homeless people. We know how many beds we have at the shelter. So it's not a surprise that we need so many beds in an emergency. That's the part of it that I think really needs to be more proactive than having stepping stones scrambling around and, emergency services coming through with, emergency operations coming through with cots so that they actually had people not sleeping on the floor, because it is the opposite of the heat, right? The vulnerable people who are sleeping outside in the heat, it's in the daytime when places are open that they need services. So that's a little easier to go to the library, the mall, whatever. But at nighttime, there is nowhere. It's like sleeping outside on a park bench. Just imagine what that would have been like in this last. So with the weather forecast and knowing the numbers, the capacity that we have and the number of people we have, I think the task force has a tremendous opportunity to be more proactive around that. Winter's not over. And we need to be that community that takes care. So thanks for the work you're all doing. I know some of these things, it caught us off. When was it ever that cold? in
And that's the thing,
December.
I mean, our heat emergencies, we've only ever had 2 years where we've had, like, all this stuff is in its infancy.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had 2 years of heat emergency. This is the first time we've ever had a coal emergency.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're, obviously, the plans are getting developed as,
What does Len say? We're building the plane in the air?
building up in the air, yeah.
Hopefully
right.
we don't lose any guys without passengers.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I missed that last bit, so this may have been spoken to already, but just adding the emergency management culture, I suppose, or just the plan into that, I think will speak to what Leslie's talking about. It's not a surprise. We have a weather forecast, and then that emergency plan is implemented ahead of time, right? That we have so many beds in here. This is what we need, and this is who we contact. That's what you're talking about, right? As far as kind of incorporating this particular type of emergency into what we already deal with as far as wildfire. Have articulated plans for those. We have evacuation plans.
The cold weather response plan is basically the property of BC Housing. They have a plan filed with the provincial government, and in that plan, they have somebody identified as the person who's authorized to declare a cold weather emergency. And when that person declares a cold weather emergency, that activates the plan and opens up funding windows. We are coordinating with them through Nelson Emergency Management to try and hopefully bring everything to just a little bit of a higher level as far as like awareness and preparedness and all that sort of stuff. But the cold weather response plan is held by BC Housing, not Nelson Emergency Management.
So who's that person?
Well,
We're not sure because we haven't.
We're not sure, that's
So
problematic.
it's, yeah, well, so because cold weather emergencies are something that's
Yep.
new, we had to research a lot of this while the emergency was happening,
Building the plane.
building the plane. And so, we reached out to some organizations to find out that information. And I don't believe,
it
because,
took me 3.5 days to get a call back, following up twice a day.
Sorry, not.
And then by the time, sorry, yeah, go ahead.
But wouldn't, like, you said this is a new thing, and it may be a new thing for us, but like, there's lots of municipalities across the country that I imagine deal with cold weather emergencies yearly, all the time.
and that's why the cold weather response plan exists,
Because of that.
but BC Housing is their plan.
Uh-huh.
Because they're the one that houses people.
Can we not just ask them to designate one of you as that person, and then it's more in-house?
It's provincially legislated, so
It's a provincial government plan, and it's got a waterfall, like it's got a matrix of how it comes before, once every shelter bed in the community is full, and there's no other shelter beds available, then these guys get to go to work to try to mitigate the issue or find the next spot. But until you get there, then
That just seems like that
Chasing our
panic
tail.
level is built into the system then, like you can't do anything until it's already too late, basically. So is there any way around
Well, I
that
think-
as a municipality?
it sounds to me that potentially that if this group is gonna get together to discuss it, it will be to have a plan so that's triggered 10 minutes before the other plan gets
Yeah.
to full capacity.
Or understanding what the capacities are, so we
Yeah.
can say, okay,
Yeah,
if
find
we're
out what the-
approaching this,
exactly.
then we can.
and find out
start
what the
to-
challenges are for, a lot of the challenges this go around were obviously just manpower to staff these facilities 24/7. And so that's what the task force is doing, is working with BC Housing and the other stakeholders so that when their plan is at capacity, that we have a plan and that maybe, and there's definitely opportunity to work with them to extend their capacity as well. Yeah.
And this year we had fewer beds here available compared to what we've had in previous years, just in terms of winter shelter beds, because of staffing. That's one of the main reasons. You have to have staff these facilities. So the beds are used, I believe, 4 beds. 4 less beds. Globally, maybe 5. But we didn't have, it's all due to basically staff. So I think good work is ahead, and
Yeah.
as Councillor Payne brings forward, is that obviously winter isn't over yet. It seems to me that February is the, in fact, Nelson Hydro, peak utilization is in February, so that tells me that we're using a lot of something in February.
Coldest night of the
so,
year.
Yeah, there's still time ahead, but I think that obviously farming and committee and moving around is the direction that we need to go. But yeah, cold is BC housing, heat is a different.
Okay, I'm gonna move on to the next slide. So this is just looking forward. This is the modernization of the emergency management legislation. There's a lot of information here. I'm not gonna go over all of it, but what I will go over is the highlights. It's gonna increase the responsibility on a local municipality, municipal governments. There's gonna be policy shifts, emphasis on disaster risk reduction, indigenous knowledges and considerations, and organize critical infrastructure owners' roles in disaster and risk emergency management. So I think we've touched on that throughout the remainder of the earlier parts of the presentation, where it's just gonna be more work. All right, so now we're getting into this one here. We've promised it a couple of times now, and so without further ado, next slide. No, just joking. Okay, so we're applying for a new executive assistant position that is split between emergency management and fire. There's lots of information on this slide, but I am going to touch on every point. Over the past 6 years, the workload and projects, the Nelson Fire and Rescue, Nelson Emergency Management, that Nelson Fire and Rescue and Nelson Emergency Management have evolved significantly, while the administrative support has remained the same. Both departments are currently exceeding administrative capacity. This new position is critical in supporting both fire and EM programs moving forward. With the increase in available grants, changes in legislation, and community outreach needs, we are at capacity, and we are seeking approval for the new position to help both fire and emergency management. So why now? Well, the modernization of provincial emergency management legislation, which is going to increase the responsibility for the local authority. The increased likelihood of responses, which are emergency events. They're more frequent and severe. Current positions have assumed so many roles, there's limited ability to complete essential projects. The depth of the program impacting our ability to be a leader for small municipality emergency programs. Challenged to meet strategic goals in an appropriate time frame. Plans and procedures require regular maintenance review, and then both departments are at capacity. So I've got some speaking notes on the plan here, which I'll just make sure that I've touched on. With all that's going on within Nelson, EM, and Nelson Fire and Rescue Services, there is a clear need for additional capacity and support. We need to overcome single points of failure for our business continuity. Continuity of programs during absences and prolonged emergency responses. So every time that we activate the EOC, all of the emergency management, sorry, for some reason, so yeah, every time we have a emergency, the EOC activated, which is in one of our 6 emergencies a year, very limited emergency management work gets done other than the response part. So all the planning, all the other pillars of emergency management, with the exception of response, aren't happening. So Now, since Nelson Emergency Management's inception, which was in 2018, we hired our first emergency coordinator in 2019. We've actually lost 3 coordinators due to workload and other job opportunities. So building an EM program from the ground up is a very large undertaking and results in staff being overwhelmed and unsupported. The loss of each coordinator sets the program back significantly, as hiring and getting familiar with new roles takes a long time. Starting in 2022, we hired what is now our 4th EM coordinator. We can't continue to operate the same model and expect different results. We need to support our staff, set them up for success, and this new shared executive assistant program is what EM and fire needs. So that is what that slide indicates. Now, the benefits and offsets, goals and benefits. So increased capacity of the emergency management program and the EOC. The ability to secure and effectively manage all aspects of grants, both fire and emergency management, which includes not only the grants that we're currently doing, but seek out more and hopefully be able to do more. Increased revenue through the ability to seek out new grants. I just touched on that, sorry. Improved public engagement and preparedness through increased presence in the community. Continue continuity between fire, emergency management, and other city departments. Oversee administrative duties so high-level staff can focus on policy and operational strategies and planning. And the stability of the emergency program during EOC activations and absences. So if you remember in one of the other slides there was the REDIP grant for $180,000. So this estimated cost to the city is assuming that we're denied for the grant funding. There are the UBCM CRI, the UBCM emergency EM grants. They're moving in ways that we can write off more and more of our administrative obligations in maintaining these grants. So we do have, between those grants and other grants and stuff, we believe that if we don't get that REDIP grant, that the estimated cost to the city is going to be approximately $65,000. So we've been able to account for $35,000 in just applying the administrative position cost recovery through the actual grant work. If we get that REDIP grant, then we'll have 2 years of funding for the position. But because that grant isn't approved until March, we need approval of a concept to go ahead with the position regardless of the funding. So that's kind of where we're sitting at as far as that.
It's an easy question. Are you expecting it to be like an external type posting, or are you expecting to do what you did before and build from the inside and then get the backwards coverage?
Yes, so we obviously I'll talk with HR about the fine points on how that goes, but yeah, the intent is to promote within and backfill. But
I gotcha.
yeah.
I could picture it.
Any questions?
Just on this
Sure.
note, I'll say, like, I don't think the department's looking for you to green light anything at this point. They just want to present it as a concept, and, you know, we'll come back to you probably at an meeting together just to talk about this role and some other kind of things as well with this, but they just wanted to, you know, as far as changes in the department, there aren't any. It's the regular staff, inflationary increases. This is the only thing that's kind of a little bit outside that, so they wanted to just kind of present the concept to you, and kind of that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Jury. So, I mean, I was just gonna say, Chief, is it, I guess, you talked about the fact that we're on our 4th emergency management lead. I'm not too sure whether you know this, if you saw the contract. I think maybe you were still, Chief McCharles might have still been chief, but my understanding is that John has a no cut, no trade line in his employment agreement, so he unfortunately cannot leave the city anytime in the
They
near.
locked him in, did they?
That was
The near term, he's, yeah, so he may have missed that part of his contract, but we will not be looking anytime in the near future for the fifth emergency management programmer. So just in case you missed that in terms of his hire, you'll have to go back to that contract again. So, Councillor, do we have any further questions?
I would just say, Mayor, that like, you know, I having been here for 4 years and now going into the second term here, I really seen this kind of growth in that time of really needing to like find sustainability actually in like in the hiring and in retaining staff, and it's critical that we aren't burning out people, because the process of burning out and hiring new is very expensive anyways. So in some ways, this is front loading so that we aren't losing people to burn out. So I just think this is, just for sustainability, it's a good proposal.
Councillor Tate?
When you get these sorts of pieces, like how flexible is it? How flexible can the job descriptions be? Is there space in that kind of like for shuffling and such as you move? Like I think you said it was 2 years. If the needs of the department change or shift, or are you locked into like this person can only do these things because of how the grant is written?
Yeah, so when you propose a grant, you write an application, you can't shift the project without contacting the grantor.
Okay.
They can approve or disapprove
Okay.
the reallocation of funds or the change in the project.
Right.
The Reddit grant that we submitted, it was specific to EM, and providing EM support, administrative support, grant support, and just overall program support. So we could see some fire tasks being put into that just because of the emergency aspect of them.
Okay.
But it's not like a really transferable throughout. any
Some
department.
wiggle room
Some wiggle
within
room.
the big picture.
Yeah, it's
I like
gotta be
that.
arguable.
Yeah, so the position was an identified need. This has been a process that's been going on a year now. When the assessment was done and then the work through human resources and then some delays and stuff like that. It was only due to, us being problem solvers that we're trying to find something to offset the cost of it, because it's just the responsible thing to do. But, I think we need to go forward. If we get that grant funding, great. If we don't, this is the cost. And, we're always looking at opportunities to lessen the impact on taxpayers. But sometimes with grants, it's crystal ball gazing. We haven't been denied a grant yet, but I'm not 100%. Yeah, exactly. This might be the one. I don't know. I hope not.
Okay, seeing no further questions, I'd like to thank you for the presentations today. We know you'll be back as we get into the numbers. And Chris, do you have any final comments that you wanted to make? Or are we good till next Friday when we meet again?
Yeah, I think we can, got lots of chances to meet again. I learned a lot from the presentation. These are gonna be more extensive in this first year, because when we do this again next year, we'll know a lot of the background here, so it'll be a much shorter schedule. But I think for this first year and for the folks that were here 4 years ago, it's kind of a good refresher.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, it's really important for the new counselors to sort of really get an understanding. And yes, it takes more time here at the front end, but once you get it under your belt, you'll be better off next year when we go through it again. So, okay, so in that case, there are no late items, no notice of motions, no council reports are due today. And so if I could have a resolution to adjourn the meeting, moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Page. All those in favor? Thank you. And if I could just have councillors stay behind for just a couple of seconds, please.